I woke to the sound of a woman trying not to die. A wet breath came from beside me, then a pause that lasted too long. The wagon hit a rut. 5 women shifted under old blankets. One coughed blood into a cloth. Another protected a swollen leg from the floorboards. My last memory was headlights filling an ambulance windshield after a night shift. The memories in my head now belonged to someone else. My new name was Leon Arden, 25 years old, a disgraced minor noble. My uncle had exiled me to a border territory called Grey Hollow, and the transfer decree had dragged my 5 political wives with me. Grey Hollow was a plague village. I looked at the women again. Every one of them was sick. I had been alive in this world for perhaps 30 seconds, and already had 6 patients, including myself. Wonderful, I whispered. That was how Leon Arden's second life began. In a plague wagon, with 5 sick wives and a village ahead that had already been written off as dead. There was no time to mourn the life he had lost. The woman beside him needed help now. The ash-blonde woman nearest the wagon wall opened tired, steel-gray eyes. Leon? Her voice carried surprise, rather than affection. That told him more about the previous owner of this body than the inherited memories did. Leon pushed himself upright. His arms trembled from simple effort. The body was underfed, dehydrated, and bruised from travel. The youngest woman coughed again. Pale gold hair stuck to her fever-damp forehead. That was critical. Leon moved toward her on his knees. Someone tried to stop him, but he ignored it and pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck. Her pulse was fast and weak. Her skin burned under his hand. Her breathing was shallow. Purple shadows sat beneath her closed eyes. Selena, the quiet woman beside her said, she has barely spoken since yesterday. Leon nodded once. How long has the fever been this high? The women exchanged looks. That simple question frightened them. The cold-faced woman sitting opposite him answered first. Her name surfaced from memory. Elira Vane Arden, 27, eldest wife, daughter of a merchant noble. The old Leon had rarely spoken to her, unless required. 4 days, Elira said. The escort's healer gave her willow bark and bled her twice. His hand stopped. He did what? Elira seemed unsure whether Leon had failed to hear. He bled her. He looked at Selena's pale lips. Of course he did. Why let the infection have all the fun? A faint sound came from the other side of the wagon. It might have been a laugh, but it turned into a cough. The woman with the injured leg, Mira, was watching him with narrowed amber eyes. Even sick, she looked like someone who preferred problems she could hit. Her chestnut hair had been hacked short near one side, likely to keep it out of her face during the attack that injured her. You sound different, she said. Leon met her eyes. I feel terrible. It may be improving my personality. That earned a real, if brief, smile from the quiet one. Nessa was 22, with ink-black hair braided neatly, despite the journey, and muted violet eyes that missed very little. She had been sick with the same fever as Selena, but not as severely. The 5th woman slept against a rolled blanket. Livia had copper-red hair, a freckled face, moss-green eyes hidden behind closed lids, and breathing that carried a faint wheeze. She was too thin. The inherited memories said she had always suffered attacks that left her struggling for air, but the road had made them worse. The wagon slowed. Outside, a man shouted an order. Hooves scraped on stone. Leon crawled to the rear flap and pushed it aside. Gray walls stood ahead beneath a washed-out afternoon sky. The village gate was open, though no guard stood beside it. A wooden quarantine sign leaned crookedly against a post. Beyond the gate lay a road lined with shuttered houses and weeds growing through the mud. The market stood silent. The dogs were gone, and only a few chimneys sent smoke into the washed-out sky. A few figures watched from windows. The escort stopped 30 paces from the gate. Their captain rode back toward them, wearing a scarf over his mouth. He was a broad man named Sarek, according to Leon's memory, and he looked far healthier than anyone inside the wagon. Lord Arden, he called. Your land awaits. Leon climbed down slowly, his knees nearly folded when his boots hit the road, but he kept standing. I need your healer. Sarek's eyes creased with amusement above the scarf. For which one? All of them. Selena first. The healer says there is nothing more to do. Your healer bled a dehydrated woman with a high fever. I would like to hear his next idea before deciding whether to arrest him or examine his head for damage. Sarek did not. He leaned one arm on the saddle horn. There are healers in Grey Hollow, or there were. Most have good graves. His inherited memories supplied the answer before Leon asked. Garrick Arden's decree had assigned the village, its debts, its surviving population, and all responsibility for quarantine to him. Under frontier law, a landed noble's registered household moved with his title, unless a marriage was formally dissolved. Garrick had used an emergency plague transfer that took effect before any petition could be heard. The women's families could challenge him later, but doing that now meant a public legal fight with the man controlling the senior Arden house while their daughters were already ill. None had chosen it. The escort's duty ended at the boundary stones. They had not been sent to help them settle. They had been sent to make sure they reached the place where they were expected to die. Leon glanced at the wagons behind them. Two held furniture and sealed chests. Another held sacks of grain. Not enough for a village. Probably enough to make the exile appear legal. Unload everything inside the gate, Leon said. Sarek laughed. Our orders are to deliver the household to Grey Hollow. You are standing in Grey Hollow. The household includes the property listed in the transfer documents. Then carry it yourself. The soldiers were listening now. Leon stepped closer to his horse. The new body was weak enough that he could feel his pulse in his temples. But the years he had spent talking to drunk relatives, violent patients, and men who believed an ambulance crew existed to obey them had given him one useful skill. Leon knew how to sound tired of someone's stupidity. You can leave the grain outside a quarantined settlement if you want, but your quartermaster signed the inventory. If half of it disappears before sunset, I will still send his signature to the governor, with a note explaining that Captain Sarek abandoned Crown-recorded supplies on a public road. Perhaps nothing happens. Perhaps your commander decides he dislikes explaining missing grain during an audit. The amusement left Sarek's eyes. He could still refuse. Leon had no soldiers, no influence, and barely enough strength to remain upright. But bureaucracy was a weapon people respected, because it could cut them months after the fight ended. Sarek spat into the road. Then he ordered the wagons through the gate. That was his first victory in the new world. It lasted 7 minutes. The moment they entered Grey Hollow, Selena stopped responding entirely. A hunched old man met them near the central well. He wore a brown coat polished by years of use and carried a staff, not because of rank, but because one knee clearly hurt. He introduced himself as Elder Tom, the acting village headman. His gaze moved from him to the women being helped from the wagon. There was no hostility in it. Pity would have required more energy than he had left. The manor still has a roof, he said. Mostly. If your lordship wants to die indoors, it is the best place. Mira muttered something impolite. Leon liked her immediately. How many people are left? Leon asked. 183 this morning. It may be 180 by nightfall. Depends what you call sick. Fever, vomiting, diarrhea, confusion, difficulty breathing, infected wounds, severe weakness. For the first time, the old man looked directly at him. Most of us. The manor stood at the western edge of the village, behind a broken stone wall. Manor was generous. It had 2 floors, 7 usable rooms, a collapsed stable, and windows patched with oilcloth. One side of the roof had burned at some point and been repaired with mismatched boards. Still, it had doors. That mattered later. At the time, Leon cared about beds, water, and Selena's breathing. The escort dumped crates in the courtyard and left before the sun touched the hills. No farewell, no final threat. Garrick did not need one. The village itself was supposed to finish them. Leon put Selena in the cleanest room he could find. and opened the shutters. Nessa followed every instruction without argument. She brought boiled water after Leon explained why. Elira found linen. Mira tried to stand and nearly fell. Livia woke long enough to insist she could help, then had to sit because her breathing tightened. The village healer arrived near sunset. Harold Fenn was almost 60, bald on top, white-bearded at the jaw, and carried a leather case full of dried plants, needles, and small knives. He examined Selena for less than a minute. "Black fever," he said. "Late stage. What do you usually do?" Harold looked offended by usually. "Willow tea. Cool cloth. Prayer if the family wants it. If the heat rises too far, a small bleeding can calm the blood." Leon closed his eyes. "No bleeding. My lord, with respect, no bleeding." Harold studied him. "Then she may not survive the night." "She may not survive it anyway. That does not mean we help the disease." Leon needed medication. Antibiotics, fluids, fever control, something for nausea, masks, gloves, disinfectant. He needed more than that, but those were the immediate priorities. Leon had none of them. He walked into the manor's narrow pantry and shut the door because he needed a moment away from everyone. His hand rested against the wood. A line of pale text appeared in the air. "Modern pharmacy access available." Leon stared at it. Then, another line appeared with the only instruction he received. "Close an ordinary fixed door, touch it, and open access." The system offered no guide, statistics, levels, or attributes. Its simplicity was almost insulting. Leon shut the pantry door fully and touched the wood. The brass latch became a steel handle, and white light edged the frame. Leon opened it. On the other side was a pharmacy large enough to make his exhausted brain stop working for 3 full seconds. A dark refrigerator door caught his faint reflection. A lean young man with deep green eyes, blue-black hair, and a single silver streak falling over the right side of his forehead. At least the new face would be easy to recognize. Bright ceiling panels, clean tile, shelves, refrigerated cabinets, locked medication storage, first aid supplies, hygiene products, thermometers, bandages, masks, gloves, bottles of antiseptic lined in obedient rows. The air smelled faintly of alcohol and detergent. Leon stepped through. Behind him was the same pantry door, standing alone in a white wall. There were no employees, no customers. At the center waited a self-service counter with a dark screen. Leon touched it. The screen lit. Balance available in local currency. Leon checked the amount. Then he laughed once. It was not a happy sound. Derek had sent them into exile with enough money to buy a respectable horse, roughly 3 months of a skilled worker's cash wages. It sounded generous until Leon priced 1 night of modern treatment for a house full of sick people. Apparently, death had not freed him from healthcare budgeting. "Of course," Leon muttered. "Even after reincarnation, medicine is still expensive." Leon started choosing what he needed most. Not everything he wanted. What he needed. That distinction had kept ambulances stocked through long weekends, and would now decide whether Selena saw morning. When Leon returned through the door, 20 minutes had passed. Leon carried 2 bags and had spent nearly every coin he possessed. Harold was waiting outside the pantry. He stared at the bags, then at him, then at the pantry. "My lord," he said carefully, "that room does not have another exit." "It does now." He opened his mouth. Later, Leon went back to Selena. The first night was ugly. There was no miracle. Leon gave fluid slowly, because she was nauseated. He cooled her safely, monitored her breathing, started the medication he judged appropriate from the symptoms and the disease pattern he had seen in the others. He kept written times, because fatigue makes liars of memory. Nessa held the lamp and copied each instruction after he realized she could read quickly. Harold argued twice. The first time was about the tablets. "What herb is that?" "Not an herb." "Mineral?" "No." "Also, no." He frowned at the white tablet in his palm. "Then what is it?" "Something I need her to swallow." The second argument was about the thermometer. Harold watched the numbers settle on a small digital display. "Where is the crystal?" "There isn't one." He turned it over. "There must be. You may search for the magical crystal after she is stable. He did search later. He never found it. Near midnight, Selena's fever climbed again. Her breathing worsened. Leon moved her, listened to her lungs with a basic stethoscope from the pharmacy, and felt the old, cold focus settle over him. This was the part of medicine people rarely romanticized. Waiting, rechecking, changing small things, watching numbers. Knowing that a body might recover or fail while you stood beside it with all your knowledge, and still could not command the outcome. At some point, Illyra placed a cup of water beside him. "You should sleep," she said. "So should she." "I know." Illyra remained for a moment. In the dim room, her face looked sharper than her 27 years. She had the controlled expression of someone raised to never display fear in front of servants, rivals, or family. Her fingers were shaking around the edge of her shawl. "Can you save her?" Leon could have lied. The previous Leon probably would have promised something grand or blamed fate. "I think she has a chance," Leon said. "A better one than she had this morning. But I cannot promise." Illyra studied him for several seconds. "You really are different. People keep saying that. I'm starting to worry the old me was unpleasant." Her mouth almost moved into a smile. "The old you would have been in another room by now." Then she left. Just before dawn, Selena's fever began to fall. Not dramatically. No golden light. No sudden return of color. The number on the thermometer simply came down a little, and an hour later, it came down again. Her pulse steadied. Her breathing became less frantic. When the first gray morning light entered the room, her eyes opened. They were pale blue. She stared at the ceiling, confused, then turned her head toward him. Her voice was so quiet, Leon had to lean closer. "Did I die?" Leon looked around at the cracked plaster, the leaking corner of the ceiling, and the bucket catching rainwater beside the bed. "Given the house, it would be a reasonable conclusion," Leon said. "But no." Selena blinked. A weak laugh escaped her. It became a cough, but not the terrible empty cough from the wagon. Behind him, someone made a choked sound. Nessa had fallen asleep, sitting against the wall with her notebook in her lap. Livia was standing in the doorway, one hand over her mouth. Illyra looked away quickly. Mira, supported by Harold, stared at Selena with such fierce relief that her injured leg might as well have stopped existing for a moment. Harold stepped toward the bed. He touched Selena's forehead. Then he looked at the medicine cups on the table. "What did you give her?" "Treatment. That is not an answer. It is the answer you are getting until I have slept." He picked up the thermometer again and squinted at it, as though the missing magic crystal might reveal itself out of guilt. Leon should have laughed. Instead, his legs gave out. Mira caught his shoulder before Leon hit the floor. "You look worse than the patient," she said. "Excellent bedside manner." "I am not the healer." "Then you have no excuse." She snorted and helped him into a chair. Outside, Grey Hollow was waking to another day of sickness, empty houses, and graves. Inside the manor, one woman who had been expected to die before sunrise was asking for water. That was when Leon understood what the pharmacy really meant. In his old world, most of what sat on those white shelves was ordinary. Useful, regulated, sometimes expensive, sometimes boring. Here, where people died from infected cuts and healers still debated whether fever lived in the blood, that ordinary pharmacy was more valuable than a dragon's hoard. But the shelves did not choose the treatment for him. They did not make the medicine free. And they did not change the one fact every medic learns sooner or later. A tool is only useful if you know when to use it. Grey Hollow had 180 people left. 5 of them were his wives. Leon had enough medicine already purchased to cover perhaps 3 or 4 more serious patients, but almost no coin left to replace anything he used. And by midday, people were already gathering outside the manor gate. The people outside the manor did not shout or demand anything. That made it worse. They simply waited. There were 9 of them at first, an old woman with a bandaged hand, a man holding one arm against his chest, 2 mothers with children, a boy perhaps 16 years old, whose eyes were glassy with fever, Another woman stood apart from the others, with a cloth over her mouth, supporting a husband who could barely remain upright. By noon, there were 14. Leon watched them through the cracked front window while chewing a piece of stale bread. Illyra sat at the table, across from him, with their remaining coins arranged in neat stacks. There were not many stacks. How many? Leon asked. If you mean people outside, 14. If you mean coins, less than yesterday. I am beginning to suspect you notice illness more easily than money. Money usually complains less loudly. Illyra pushed one stack toward him. This is what remains after food, lamp oil, and the repairs necessary to keep rain out of Selena's room. That is depressing. I thought numbers might make it more elegant. They did not. Over the next 10 days, the manor became two things at once, and the beginning of a clinic none of them had intended to build. Leon refused to open the gates to every patient immediately. It would have been satisfying and catastrophically stupid. 5 women inside were still recovering. Nessa had black fever herself. Livia's breathing could turn dangerous with little warning. Illyra's lungs were inflamed enough that walking from one room to another left her pale. Mira's leg had a deep infected wound running along the outer calf, angry red skin spreading around it. So Leon treated the people already under his roof first. Mira became his second serious test. Harold had been warning for days that the leg would need to be removed if the corruption climbed any farther. He used the word corruption because germ theory had not made it into local medical tradition. He understood that dirty wounds killed people, but his explanation involved bad humors, trapped heat, and occasionally offended spirits, depending on which teacher he quoted. The practical result was more important than the theory. He knew the leg was getting worse. Leon cleaned the wound properly, removed dead tissue he could safely manage, used antiseptic, sterile dressings, and medication from the pharmacy. He marked the edge of the redness with ink, so they could see whether it spread. Mira watched the mark with open suspicion. You drew on me. Medical procedure. It looks like a crooked circle. A highly advanced crooked circle. She looked at Harold. Is he always like this when treating people? The old healer was leaning over a sealed packet of gauze with the concentration of a priest examining holy scripture. I have known him for 6 days, Harold said. I have stopped guessing. Mira's leg hurt badly during the first several treatments. She never screamed. Instead, she insulted the ceiling, Garrick, the escort captain, the village road, and once his hands. Your hands are too cold. I can warm them. No. Finish first. Then warm them somewhere else. By the 4th day, the redness had retreated inside the ink line. By the 6th, the swelling was down enough that Harold stood with both hands on his hips and stared at the leg for nearly a minute. I would have cut it, he admitted. Mira looked at him. I know, you told me every morning. I was preparing you. You were annoying me. Harold pointed at him. He is worse. Yes, Mira said, but he kept my leg. That settled the debate. Illyra took longer. Her cough had begun before the journey and worsened after days in the wet wagon. Leon monitored her breathing, temperature, hydration, and response to treatment. It was not dramatic. She simply improved in increments so small that she tried to deny them. On the 3rd morning, she insisted on coming downstairs. She made it halfway, stopped with one hand on the wall, and discovered that pride was not an effective substitute for oxygen. Leon found her sitting on the steps, pretending she had chosen the location. Going somewhere? The table. Ambitious. I have been confined to bed for 5 days. You have lungs full of inflammation. They are less interested in your schedule than I am. Illyra glared at him, then allowed him to help her down. The moment she reached the table, she asked for the account ledger. That was when Leon understood her recovery was going well. Nessa recovered faster. Her case of black fever had been less severe, but dehydration had left her weak and dizzy. Once she could sit comfortably, she became impossible to separate from a notebook. Leon showed her how he wanted temperature, pulse, fluid intake, medication time, and changes in symptoms recorded. She absorbed the system with unsettling speed. On the 2nd day, she corrected him. You gave Selena her evening dose 11 minutes late. Leon looked at the page. She had written every time exactly. You are enjoying this. A little. Try not to look so pleased when catching the healer making mistakes. That was the first time Leon heard Alira laugh from the next room. Livia's problem was different. She was starved more than infected. The road had reduced her meals because nausea and breathing attacks made eating difficult. Her chronic condition had apparently been treated with incense, bitter syrups, and strict advice to avoid cold air, excitement, exertion, dust, strong smells, weak smells, night air, and several foods she actually liked. The pharmacy gave him access to appropriate modern medication and simple supportive equipment. But Leon still needed to understand her pattern. They spent an afternoon going through triggers and previous episodes. Livia answered every question seriously, until Leon asked whether strong emotion made the attacks worse. Sometimes. Fear? Yes. Anger? Yes. Laughter? She hesitated. Occasionally. Then Mira is medically dangerous. From the bed across the room, Mira threw a folded cloth at him. Livia laughed, immediately coughed, then glared at both of them. I hate that you proved your point. Once her breathing was controlled, and she could eat properly, her recovery showed fastest in her face. The hollow look around her eyes softened. Color returned. She began walking through the manor with sleeves rolled up, opening windows, criticizing dust, and discovering household disasters with the energy of someone who had been trapped in bed too long. Selena remained the weakest. Her fever fell, returned mildly, then fell again. Leon watched her more closely than the others, because she had arrived closest to death. One evening, Leon checked her pulse while she was awake and found her watching him. You do that every time you enter the room. Do what? Look at my chest first. I am checking whether you are breathing. Do you expect me to stop? I prefer to be prepared. Selena considered that, then pulled the blanket higher. It is strange. Before we came here, everyone spoke as though we were already dead. The escort, the servants who refused to come. Even my mother's steward would not meet my eyes when he gave me the travel cloak. She turned her face toward the window. Outside, the village bell rang once to mark another death. You are the first person who keeps checking. Leon did not have a clever answer for that. So Leon adjusted the blanket, told her to drink the rest of the water, and left before he said something sentimental enough to embarrass both of them. By the 8th day, all 5 women were out of immediate danger. It should have felt like a finish line. Instead, it felt like someone had opened a second door. Because Grey Hollow had noticed. People saw Selena standing at the upstairs window. They saw Mira walking with a stick on a leg Harold had publicly declared lost. They saw Livia in the yard helping hang washed sheets. They saw Elira sitting at the manor table conducting arguments about grain prices while still wrapped in 2 blankets. Rumors moved faster than disease when people wanted them to. The 14 patients outside the gate became 26. Then a woman named Marta forced the decision. She arrived carrying a boy, perhaps 7 years old. He was limp against her shoulder, face flushed, breathing too fast. She had walked from the far side of the village, and one of her shoes had split open. By the time she reached the manor, she could barely stand. Mira saw her first. Leon. There was something in her voice that made him put down the bandage Leon was sorting. They brought the boy into the courtyard, but not inside the house. Leon examined him under a lean-to they had cleaned for exactly this purpose. High fever, dehydration, severe weakness, signs consistent with black fever, though not yet at Selena's worst stage. Treatable, Leon thought. Then Elira appeared beside him with the ledger. She did not have to speak. Leon knew the cost. They had enough medicine to finish the treatments already underway. They had limited reserve. If Leon started treating every fever in Grey Hollow at full expense, they would be empty before the week ended. Marta was watching his face. People learn to read hesitation in medical workers. They know when a pause means bad news. Please, she said. One word. That was all. Leon hated it. Not because she was asking too much. Because she was asking exactly what Leon wanted to do, and the responsible answer might still be no. Leon looked toward the village road. More people waited beyond the gate. If Leon spent everything on this boy, what happened to the next child? If Leon refused, what exactly was the point of having the pharmacy? Illyra stepped away. For a moment, Leon thought she had decided not to interfere. Then, she returned with a small wooden box. She placed it on the table and opened the lid. Inside lay a sapphire pendant, 2 gold rings, and a pair of pearl earrings. "These are mine," she said. Mira limped forward and dropped a silver bracelet beside them. Nessa added a thin chain. Livia went back inside and returned with jeweled hairpins. Selena, who was not supposed to be out of bed for long, appeared in the doorway, clutching a small ruby brooch. Leon stared at all 5 of them. "You do understand that Garrick sent us here with almost nothing, precisely because he expected us to die?" Illyra folded her arms. "Yes. These may be the last valuable things you personally own. Also yes. And if I sell them, I am going to spend the money on medicine for people we met 8 days ago." Mira leaned against her stick. "Are you trying to convince us, or yourself?" Leon looked at the boy. He had begun shivering, despite the heat. That ended the discussion. The pharmacy's payment system accepted local currency, not jewelry. But Grey Hollow still had one pawnbroker who had not fled because, as Elder Thom explained, Old Pell considered death less frightening than leaving his shop unattended. Pell bought the jewelry at a price Illyra described as criminal. Pell replied that healthy customers could negotiate better. Illyra sat in his shop for 40 minutes and somehow raised the price by nearly a third while coughing into a handkerchief. Leon decided never to bargain against her. They treated the boy. His name was Tomas. He vomited half the first dose, hated the rehydration mixture, cried when Leon took his temperature, and tried to hide under his mother's coat whenever Harold approached, because Harold still looked like the sort of healer who might carry leeches. 3 days later, Tomas was sitting up, eating broth. 4 days later, he demanded bread. 5 days later, he escaped the cot, walked into the courtyard, and was caught trying to climb a rain barrel. Marta cried so hard when she saw him standing that Tomas became embarrassed and asked why everyone was behaving strangely. That victory changed Grey Hollow more than Selena's recovery had. Selena was a noblewoman behind a manor wall. Tomas was theirs. People knew his mother. They knew the house he came from. They had watched his older sister die 2 months earlier. When Tomas walked home, half the street followed. The next morning, there were 40 people outside the manor. That same afternoon, a man named Baron arrived too late. He was 50 perhaps, a cooper by trade, broad-shouldered even after weeks of illness. His sons carried him on a door because he could no longer walk. His breathing was shallow. His skin was mottled. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Leon worked on him for hours. Nessa kept records. Harold assisted. They used the medicine he had, fluids, and a small portable oxygen cylinder and mask, sold among the pharmacy's home care equipment. Every reasonable measure Leon could manage with his training and circumstances. Nothing reversed the damage already done. Near sunset, his blood pressure collapsed. He died with both sons beside him. Afterward, one of the sons asked him what they had done wrong. Leon washed his hands in a basin and took longer than necessary before answering. Nothing. But Tomas lived. Tomas came earlier. Your father was already much sicker when he reached me. The younger son clenched his jaw. You have medicine that saved the Lord's wives? Yes. Then why did it not save him? That question could have become dangerous. Leon felt the people outside listening. He dried his hands. Because medicine is not a command you give the body. It improves the chance. Sometimes the chance is still too small. If I tell you otherwise, I become another man selling miracles. The older son looked at his father's face. Then he asked if they could use one of their clean sheets to wrap him. They gave them 2. That night, Grey Hollow understood the rule. Leon could do things their healers had never seen. Leon could not raise the dead. Oddly, that made some people trust him more. By the end of the second week, Leon stopped thinking of the manor as a house. The front room had become an examination area. The old dining hall held 6 cots. A covered shed in the yard was used for people with fever until they knew whether they were contagious. Livia had organized laundry lines by cleanliness. Nessa had 3 ledgers. Harold had stopped asking whether every plastic object contained a magic crystal. Almost stopped. He still distrusted the thermometer. One morning Leon caught him holding it close to a candle. "What are you doing?" He straightened immediately. "You were heating it. I wanted to see whether the numbers obeyed fire." "And?" Harold looked offended. "They did. Congratulations, you have discovered temperature." He stared at him for 3 seconds, then pointed toward the courtyard. "There are patients waiting. Go be useful." So Leon did. But Alira's numbers continued to worsen in a different way. The frightening numbers were financial. The jewelry had bought them time, but it had not created a sustainable supply of medicine. Every person they saved needed bandages, medicine, food, clean water, sometimes days of care. The village itself barely produced enough to feed survivors. Trade had stopped months ago. Fields were abandoned. Workshops stood closed because the people who owned them were sick, dead, or gone. Leon could save patients until the money vanished. Then the pharmacy would become a brightly lit room full of things he could not afford to touch. Alira placed the ledger in front of him one evening. "At the current rate, 7 days," she said. 8 if we are lucky. 7 if we are honest. Leon leaned back in the chair. Through the open window came the sound of someone hammering a shutter back onto a nearby house. It was a small noise. A living noise. "Then, we have 7 days to make a dead village earn money." Alira looked toward the line of patients at the gate. "Preferably." She closed the ledger. "Good. I was worried this might become easy." The first thing Leon did was make half the village angry. It was not deliberate. Leon simply told them to stop using the central well. Grey Hollow had 3 wells. The oldest stood in the market square near the butcher's drain, 2 rubbish pits, and a ditch that filled with brown water whenever it rained. It was also the most convenient well, which meant everyone still healthy enough to carry a bucket used it. Leon had watched 3 families draw drinking water from it before noticing a dead rat caught between stones near the runoff channel. The next morning, Leon ordered the pump handle tied down. A crowd formed before breakfast. One man demanded to know whether Lord Arden planned to kill them through thirst, after failing to kill them through taxes. Another insisted his grandfather had drunk from that well for 70 years. Elder Thom quietly mentioned that his grandfather had died at 49. The man did not appreciate the contribution. Leon climbed onto an overturned crate because his voice was not carrying over the argument. "The north well is cleaner. The manor well is cleaner. This one is downhill from human waste and animal waste. If you want fewer people vomiting themselves to death, stop drinking what runs through the market ditch." But the water looks clear. So does cheap vodka. It can still ruin your week. No one knew what vodka was. The analogy failed. Livia rescued him. She had spent the previous afternoon walking the village with 2 older women and a charcoal stick, marking which houses had sick residents, which had usable hearths, and where people dumped waste. She climbed onto the crate beside him, took the charcoal map from her pocket, and explained the problem in practical terms. The houses nearest the north well had fewer stomach illnesses. The families using the central well had more. Livia did not speak like a physician. She spoke like a woman explaining why a kitchen floor was dirty and who was responsible for cleaning it. Somehow, that worked better. By noon, the central well was closed. By sunset, Livia had organized 6 women and 4 teenagers into the first sanitation crew in Grey Hollow. She gave them soap from the pharmacy, boiled cloth, buckets, and an authority nobody remembered granting her. They loved her within 2 days and feared disappointing her by the 3rd. Nessa built the record system beside him. At first, Leon had intended to keep a list of patients. She turned it into something useful. Each patient received a page with name, age if known, household, symptoms, temperature, treatment, and follow-up. She marked houses on Livia's map and noticed clusters faster than Leon did, because she had the entire village laid out in ink. When Leon asked how she had learned to organize information that well, she shrugged. My father kept grain warehouses. If one sack disappeared, he wanted to know which cart carried it, which servant touched it, and which rat had been nearby. Your father sounds exhausting. Useful though, Nessa smiled. Unfortunately, Mira built the opposite kind of system. People. Specifically, people capable of preventing other people from doing stupid things. Her leg was still healing, so Leon refused to let her train seriously. She ignored the spirit of that instruction while obeying the exact words. She sat on a chair in the manor yard with a cane across her knees and made 8 villagers practice moving stretchers, closing gates, and separating a frightened crowd without drawing weapons. 2 had been hunters. 1 had served in a levy years earlier. The others were simply broad enough to be useful. You are building a guard, Leon said. You are building a clinic in the richest building left standing. Richest is optimistic. You have medicine people think can defeat death. Someone will try to steal it. Leon disliked how quickly she was right. Before the thieves arrived, however, they had to solve the more immediate problem of contagious patients. Leon divided the manor and 2 empty neighboring houses into zones. People with obvious severe fever went to one building. Those with suspicious symptoms but no clear progression went to another. Recovering patients stayed in the old granary after it had been cleaned. Healthy family members were not allowed to sleep beside the sick simply because they were relatives. That last rule nearly caused a riot. People here regarded separation during illness as cruelty. Families crowded around the bed because leaving someone alone felt like abandonment. Leon understood the instinct. He also understood transmission, so he compromised. 1 designated caregiver per patient when necessary. Cloth masks were useful, hand washing, separate bedding, windows opened whenever weather allowed, boiled water, waste removed away from wells, bedding from fever patients washed separately. None of this required magic. That made it harder to sell. A potion could be revered. A rule about laundry felt insulting. Livia became terrifying on the subject. On the 3rd day, she caught Elder Tom trying to carry his sick sister's used blanket toward the common wash line. The old headman stopped when he saw her. Livia pointed toward the fever laundry tubs. He changed direction without argument. Leon witnessed the exchange from the porch. You have broken the headman, Leon told her. He is learning. He negotiated with tax collectors for 30 years. Tax collectors do not know where he sleeps. Leon decided not to ask what that meant. The manor itself changed daily. Benches appeared in the yard. A carpenter named Jory repaired 3 doors in exchange for treatment for his wife. A widow brought clean wool blankets after her daughter recovered. The Cooper's sons, despite losing their father, built them water barrels because they said he would have hated seeing good work left undone. A basket of onions, half a sack of flour, firewood, labor, nails, 1 goat that escaped twice and eventually became the unofficial enemy of Harold. The goat's name was Bishop. No one remembered why. Harold insisted Bishop had eaten a bundle of medicinal sage. Bishop denied this by staring at him while chewing. The economic problem was not solved, but the clinic stopped consuming every household resource directly. More important, recovered people started working again. Jory reopened his carpentry shed. The Cooper's older son finished 3 barrels ordered before the outbreak. 2 women restarted a communal oven because enough households were healthy to knead bread at the same time. Every recovery returned more than 1 pair of hands. It returned a worker, a parent, a neighbor, someone who could carry water for the next patient. The cycle began to turn slowly. On a rainy night 3 weeks after their arrival, Mira's prediction arrived through the back window. Leon was asleep at the table because he had made the mistake of sitting down after midnight. A crash woke him. Glass did not exist in enough quantity here for dramatic breaking windows. It was the dull snap of a wooden shutter being forced. Leon lifted his head. Nessa slept on a cot near the wall, with a ledger under one hand. Harold was in the next room. Outside, rain ticked against the roof. Then Leon heard a floorboard creak in the storage room. The medicine. Leon grabbed the nearest heavy object, which happened to be a brass candlestick. and moved toward the hall. Mira appeared from the darkness ahead of him, carrying a short sword. "You were supposed to be asleep," Leon whispered. "So were you. My crime is more medically justified." She ignored that and pointed toward the storeroom. They had moved the pharmacy stock out of the pantry because Leon did not want anyone accidentally opening the portal door while he was using it. The supplies were kept in a locked interior room under guard when possible. Tonight, the guard had apparently been distracted. A shadow slipped through the doorway, carrying a wooden box. Mira moved first. Her injured leg still limited her speed, so she did not charge. She slammed the flat of her sword against the doorframe. "Put it down." 3 men froze inside. Leon recognized one. A local named Ven, who had vanished from the village during the worst weeks and returned 2 days earlier. Ven held a box of antibiotics. "Lord Arden," he said, breathless, "we only need a few bottles." "That box does not contain bottles." He looked down at it. "Then, we only need a few of whatever these are. Put it down." The taller stranger drew a knife. That ended negotiation. He lunged toward Mira, correctly seeing that she was the armed threat, and incorrectly assuming her limp. Mira stepped back rather than sideways, drew him into the narrow hall, and caught his wrist with her free hand. Her bad leg buckled when he slammed into her, but she used the wall to stay upright and drove the sword hilt into his mouth. He staggered. The second man rushed him. Leon had exactly enough combat experience to know he had very little combat experience. His previous life had involved restraining drunk patients, avoiding punches in alleys, and once removing a kitchen knife from a man who thought paramedics were government spies. None of that made him a swordsman. So Leon threw the candlestick. It hit him in the forehead. He swore, which meant it worked better than expected. Leon closed the distance before he recovered and shoved a stool into his knees. He fell hard. He dropped on his arm and used both hands to pin the wrist holding the knife. He was stronger. For 3 unpleasant seconds, the blade moved toward his ribs anyway. Then someone struck him across the back with a length of firewood. Elder Tom stood behind them in a nightshirt. "I heard noise," he said. "Good timing. I am old, not deaf." The third thief tried to escape through the rear. He met 2 members of Mira's new guard coming in. The fight lasted less than a minute after that. It still left blood on the floor. The tall man Mira had hit collapsed near the stairs, holding his side. During the struggle, he had fallen onto his own knife. The wound was deep. Ven saw it and backed away. "Leave him," he said. He knew the risk. Leon knelt beside the injured thief. Nessa, Lamp, Harold, then stared at him. "He was stealing from you." "I am aware." "He could have killed Lady Mira." Mira wiped blood from her lip. "He tried. Poorly." Leon cut the man's shirt open and examined the wound, and now he is bleeding in my hallway. Ven's face twisted. "Why would you help him?" Leon looked up. "Because I am a medic. His bad decisions do not change where the artery is." Then Leon added, "Also, if he survives, he owes me for the floor." Mira laughed despite herself. They saved him. His name was Corin. He woke the next afternoon with bandages around his side and one wrist tied loosely to the cot because Mira believed gratitude was not a security plan. He stared at him for a long time. "I tried to rob you." "Yes." "You stitched me." "Also yes." "Why?" "We covered this while you were unconscious. It was a very productive conversation." He looked down at the bandage. "You heal, then you work." "Work?" "You owe the clinic the cost of treatment, a broken shutter, 2 damaged shelves, and 1 candlestick. You threw the candlestick. Because you broke in." Corin thought about arguing, decided against it, and asked what kind of work. Mira answered from the doorway. "Guard duty." His head snapped up. "You want a thief guarding medicine?" "No," she said. "I want a thief explaining how thieves think. If you steal anything, I break the leg Lord Arden spent all night keeping attached to you." Corin looked at him. "Can she do that?" "Physically, probably. Legally, we can discuss later." Not from loyalty, at first. From debt, fear, and the practical realization that Grey Hollow now offered better chances than the roads. Ven and the third thief did not receive the same offer. The outsider spent 2 days locked in an empty storeroom, under guard. Then Elder Tom had him escorted beyond the boundary, with a warning that a second visit would end before a magistrate. Ven was a Grey Hollow resident with nowhere useful to send him, so the village council put him on supervised road and drainage work until the theft debt was repaid. Mira never allowed him near the medicine store or a guard post. He worked, complained, and remained. That was enough. By the end of the 4th week, the clinic treated 40 to 60 people in various stages of illness and recovery. Not all at once. Nessa scheduled follow-ups. Harold learned which cases he could manage with basic care and which required him. Leon taught 2 widows how to clean wounds safely. Livia trained households to boil water and isolate fever patients before they reached them. Mira's guard escorted the very sick and stopped families from forcing their way into treatment rooms. Leon still tried to check everyone personally. That nearly broke him. One morning, Nessa found him standing in front of a patient page Leon had already read twice, unable to remember the last sentence. "Go to bed," she said. "I am fine. You wrote yesterday's date on 4 records. Minor error. You called Harold father an hour ago." Leon turned toward the old healer. Harold looked delighted. "Did I?" "You did," Nessa said. "He has not stopped mentioning it." "I raised him well," Harold said. Leon pointed at him. "You are older than my father was, and somehow less mature." Nessa took the ledger from his hand. "Sleep." Leon looked toward the examination room. "There are 6 waiting. Harold can handle 3. I can monitor 2. The last is a dressing change Livia already knows." That should have pleased him. Instead, it created a strange resistance in his chest. If Leon did not see the patient, what if something was missed? What if the fever changed? What if a wound looked worse than yesterday? What if someone died while Leon slept? Nessa seemed to read part of that from his face. She lowered her voice. "If you collapse, all 6 still wait. And tomorrow's 20 wait too." That was annoyingly rational. So Leon slept for 6 hours. Harold treated the minor cases correctly. Nessa noticed one patient's fever rising and moved him to the proper room. Livia changed dressings exactly as shown. Mira handled a drunk man who objected to quarantine by placing him outside the gate until he became less philosophical. The clinic functioned without him. That frightened him for about 10 seconds. Then it felt better than any miracle. At the end of the week, Elder Tom arrived carrying the burial ledger. He placed it beside Nessa's patient book. "What is this?" Leon asked. "The South Street." Leon frowned. Tom opened to the latest page. He had recorded deaths for decades because Grey Hollow had no permanent priest. During the worst month of the outbreak, the South Street had lost someone almost every day. There had been no new entry for 7 days. "A full week," he said. Leon looked toward the window. The South Street ran past the old bakery. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys. A child chased another child through mud. A woman shook a rug from an upstairs window and yelled at them to move. Nothing about the scene looked miraculous. That was why it mattered. A week without a funeral bell on one street. Grey Hollow had stopped measuring progress only by who survived treatment. For the first time, they could measure it by who never became sick enough to need him. Then, Elira entered, with a financial ledger, and ruined the moment. 6 days, she said. Leon sighed. You have terrible timing. Death has worse. She put the book on the table. They had slowed the loss of money. They had not stopped it. At their current patient load, a serious infection that needed a full course of modern medicine, dressings, and several days of support could consume the equivalent of 6 weeks of an ordinary laborer's cash wages. A routine dressing change cost a fraction of that. But Grey Hollow had far more serious cases than families with silver. Pharmacy goods could not. The village was getting healthier. Now it needed to become worth trading with again. Grey Hollow's economy had one major advantage. Almost everything was broken, which meant improvement was easy to notice. It also had one major disadvantage. Almost everything was broken. The fields nearest the village had gone partly unharvested. The mill wheel was cracked. Half the market stalls had been stripped for firewood during the worst of the outbreak. The road south had 2 washed-out sections and one bridge Elder Tom described as still standing, if you do not ask too much of it. Leon asked what too much meant. 2 wagons at once. Maybe 1 if the wagon is fat. Wagons are not usually fat. You will understand when you see the bridge. Leon did. The bridge was fatally thin. Elira's plan began with a list of people who had recovered and what they knew how to do. The result surprised him. Grey Hollow had a carpenter, 2 coopers, a blacksmith with 1 functioning arm and another almost healed, 3 weavers, 6 experienced farmers, a miller, 2 hunters, a tanner, several laborers, and a woman named Sabine, who could make soap so harsh it might have qualified as a weapon. We do not need to invent an economy, Elira said. We need to restart the one Garrick's quarantine strangled. She sat in the manor's former dining room, now an office, wearing a dark blue dress that had been repaired twice at the sleeve. Her lungs were almost fully recovered. She still tired sooner than she liked, so she solved this by making everyone else come to her. The problem is buyers, Leon said, and sellers, and transport, and reputation. You made my version sound pleasantly simple. Your version was wrong. Elira began accepting payment for treatment according to ability. A fixed price would have been absurd when one patient owned a farm and another owned 1 blanket. Poor households paid through labor or goods. Better off families contributed coin. Travelers from outside, once they started arriving, paid actual fees. To keep barter from becoming imaginary money, Nessa and Elira recorded labor and goods as clinic credit. When a recovered household later sold barrels, cloth, hides, or grain through the market, no more than 1/10 of that sale went toward any unpaid treatment balance until the debt cleared. Outside, caravans paid a small road and gate due, and permanent market stalls paid a modest fee. Those cash payments went into a medical reserve because pharmacy purchases were the one major expense that sacks of grain and days of labor could not directly cover. The important rule was that no child was turned away because a parent lacked silver, and no dying person had to negotiate before treatment. The second rule was that anyone wealthy enough to arrive in a carriage was not allowed to pretend poverty. Elira enforced the second rule with particular joy. The first serious outside patient arrived in such a carriage. Dorian Vale did not look like a man accustomed to asking rural lords for favors. He arrived with 4 guards, 2 wagons, a polished carriage, and the expression of a merchant who had spent 20 years making other men wait outside his office. This time, he waited outside his. His daughter was 16. Her name was Celia. She had fallen ill while traveling from a northern market town. Dorian's physician had treated her for 3 days with expensive tonic and increasing desperation. Someone at an inn told his guard that Grey Hollow had a mad noble who cured black fever with white stones. Dorian apparently considered mad acceptable if the other option was burying his daughter. Celia's symptoms were severe, but not yet catastrophic. High fever, dehydration, vomiting, swollen lymph nodes, weakness, worsening confusion. Leon admitted her to the quarantine house rather than the manor. Dorian objected immediately. My daughter does not sleep in a peasant hut. Today she does. I can pay for your best room. My best room has 2 recovering fever patients in it. Then move them. Leon looked at him. Dorian was tall, silver-haired at the temples, dressed in a travel coat, worth more than everything he currently wore. He seemed unfamiliar with the word. Elira appeared behind him before the argument could grow. She took in Dorian's clothes, carriage, guards, and expression in one glance. Master Vale, she said. If Lord Arden believed a silk pillow improved your daughter's chances, he would charge you for 10. Since he does not, perhaps you should save your strength for something useful. Lady Arden. Unfortunately for both of us. He knew her family name. That helped. Celia remained in the quarantine house. For 2 days, Dorian wore a path into the mud outside it. He tried to question every medication, then every rule, then Harold. That was his mistake. Harold had spent a month being confused by him, and finally found someone more confused than himself. He responded to Dorian's questions with the confidence of a man who had recently discovered thermometers. The small white tablet lowers the heat. By being swallowed. What is in it? Harold stroked his beard. Lord Arden has explained that several times. I have elected not to understand until winter. Dorian eventually stopped asking him. Celia improved on the third day. Her fever fell. She kept fluids down. Her confusion cleared. By the fifth day, she was sitting beside the window, complaining about the soup. Dorian heard the complaint from outside. His shoulders sagged so suddenly, Leon thought his knees might follow. When Celia could leave the fever house safely, Dorian placed a leather purse on Elira's table. It hit the wood with a heavy metallic sound. Name your price, he said. Elira looked at him. Leon looked at the purse. There was enough inside to cover more than 6 weeks of the clinic's current pharmacy purchases. Leon thought of Tomas, Baron, and the people still waiting every morning. Then, Leon named a fee equal to roughly 10 days of that current medical spending and pushed the rest of the purse back toward Dorian. The price was high for an ordinary household and reasonable for a wealthy merchant who had occupied a quarantine room for 5 days. Dorian frowned. That is all? That is the fee? For my daughter's life? For 5 days of treatment, supplies, and the room. Her life is not an item on my shelf. Dorian stared at him as though he suspected a trick. My bootmaker charges more for ceremonial riding boots. Leon looked down at his own shoes. They had belonged to the previous Leon, and one sole had begun separating near the toe. Dorian laughed. It was the first time Leon saw him do it. 3 days after he left, a package arrived with one of his wagons. Inside was a pair of black leather boots made with absurd care. They were 2 sizes too small. Elira discovered this while Leon was trying to force one onto his foot. She leaned against the doorframe and watched for a while. Perhaps they are medicinal. For what? Pride. I saved his daughter, and he has saved you from comfortable walking. Leon sent Dorian a note thanking him. He did not mention the size. Elira added a second note, mentioning the size. A week later, another pair arrived. They were 1 size too large. Leon began to suspect Dorian was doing it on purpose. More useful than the boots was the offer accompanying them. Dorian's wagons traveled a route connecting 3 market towns. He was willing to stop at Grey Hollow twice a month if the road could handle loaded carts and if there was actually something to buy. They had both problems. So, recovered villagers repaired the road. The recovered villagers were paid in a mixture of food, clinic credit, coin where possible, and reduced local dues for households contributing labor. Elira designed the arrangement. Elder Thom organized crews. Mira's guards protected them from animals and opportunistic thieves. Jory reinforced the southern bridge with new timber. When Leon finally walked across it without hearing ominous cracking, Elder Thom nodded proudly. Now it can take 2 fat wagons. I still hate that phrase. Grey Hollow began producing goods again. Not enough to become rich, enough to become relevant. Barrels, soap, tanned hides, wool cloth, preserved vegetables from stores that had survived, timber from managed cutting near the forest. Later, grain once the fields returned to proper use. Dorian's first caravan arrived on a bright morning 2 months after his exile. Children followed the wagons down the road as though a royal parade had entered town. For them, it nearly had. The market square reopened with 12 stalls. 12. Half were patched together from old doors. Leon stood beside Elira and watched old Pell the pawnbroker argue with one of Dorian's clerks over the price of a repaired copper pot. This is working, Leon said. Elira did not smile yet. It is beginning to work. You were impressed by a thermometer. It was familiar. I was homesick. The caravan stayed 2 days. Dorian bought barrels, soap, hides, and a surprising amount of Sabine's aggressive cleaning product. After Leon told him, wealthy households in cities might pay for soap that actually removed grease. He also brought flour, salt, lamp oil, cloth, tools, And most importantly, coin. Between market dues, road fees from Dorian's wagons, and treatment credit repaid when recovered households sold goods, the clinic earned more cash that week through a functioning village than it had through desperate payment from patients. That was the point. Healthy people created value. Value bought medicine. Medicine created more healthy people. For the first time, the pharmacy felt sustainable. Then, the returning caravan got attacked. Leon was traveling with it because 3 patients from a hamlet south of Grey Hollow needed follow-up. And because Dorian had suggested meeting a regional supplier who could sell them bulk linen and grain more cheaply than individual traders. Mira came because she trusted Rhodes even less than she trusted his ability to avoid trouble. They had 6 Grey Hollow guards, 4 of Dorian's, 3 wagons, and 20 people in total. The attack happened where the road narrowed between a wooded slope and a drainage ditch. Mira saw the first sign before anyone else. Birds lifted from the left side of the road. Not 1 or 2. A whole burst of them. She raised one hand. The columns stopped. "Shields out," she said. One of Dorian's guards frowned. "I see nothing." An arrow struck the side of his wagon. He stopped, frowning. Men came down the slope fast. 10 at first, then more behind them. Bandits. Or men dressed closely enough for the distinction to be irrelevant. Mixed weapons. Short bows, spears, axes. Their plan was simple. Frighten the drivers. Force the wagons into the ditch. Kill anyone resisting. Take the cargo. Turn the first cart. Now. The driver hesitated. She grabbed the mule's bridle herself and hauled it sideways until the wagon blocked half the road. Second, behind it. Leave a gap. The guards understood. They formed a barrier with the wagons angled across the narrow road, wheels braced against stones. Archers could not easily surround them because the ditch controlled one side and the slope slowed movement on the other. Leon had no business in the front line. So he went where he did, behind it. The first wounded man arrived 30 seconds later with an arrow through the upper arm. Leon dragged him behind the rear wheel with help from a driver, cut the shaft, checked bleeding, and stabilized the injury. Another guard took a slash across the scalp. Messy, dramatic, less dangerous than it looked. He wrapped it quickly and sent him back only after confirming he was steady enough. "I can fight," he said. "Then do it without leaking into your eyes." At the barricade, Mira used her people like pieces on a board. She did not chase attackers downhill. She did not allow the strongest guards to bunch together. When 2 bandits tried to climb under a wagon, she had a driver overturn a crate into the gap and trapped one beneath it, long enough for Corin to pull him out by the ankles. Corin had become disturbingly enthusiastic about legitimate violence. "This is better than stealing," he shouted. "Less talking," Mira snapped. "That too." The attackers changed tactics. 3 moved through the ditch, crouching below the wagon line. Another group climbed higher on the slope to shoot down into their position. Mira saw the arrows changing angle and ordered everyone closer to the wagons. One driver panicked and tried to cut a mule free. If he moved the rear cart, he would open their flank. Leon caught him by the collar. "Where are you going?" "They will kill us. If you move that wagon, they will definitely get the chance. Stay behind the wheel. You are a healer." "Exactly. I am professionally opposed to you becoming harder to treat." He stared at him. The ditch attackers emerged near the back. That part became his, whether Leon liked it or not. One came over the bank with a hatchet. Leon stepped behind the wagon tongue, forced him to approach around it, and shoved the long wooden medical chest into his path. A recovered veteran named Hale hit him in the ribs with a spear shaft. The second attacker slashed Hale's thigh before Mira's reserve guard reached them. Blood ran quickly, too quickly. Leon dropped beside Hale the moment the attacker went down. The cut had opened a vessel. Leon compressed it hard, packed and bandaged the wound, and kept pressure while the fight continued 3 meters away. Hale's face went gray. "Am I losing the leg?" "You people are obsessed with losing legs. Mira talks about hers a lot. Mira talks about everything a lot." From the barricade, Mira shouted, "I can hear you." That meant she was alive. Good. The fight turned when the bandits realized they were not breaking. They had expected merchants. They found guards who had spent weeks drilling under a woman furious about nearly losing her leg. Villagers who knew retreat meant losing the first profitable caravan Grey Hollow had seen in months. And drivers who understood that the medicine packed in one chest behind them might treat their own families later. The bandit leader tried one final rush down the slope. Mira waited until he committed his men, then pulled the front guards back 2 steps. The attackers thought the line was giving way. They crowded into the narrow gap between wagons. Mira had the second rank push forward with poles and shield boards. The packed attackers had no room to swing properly. Another lost his weapon. The leader took a spear cut across the shoulder and retreated. Once he ran, the rest followed. Mira refused pursuit. "Let them carry the lesson," she said. The entire battle lasted perhaps 6 minutes. It felt much longer from ground level. They had 4 wounded badly enough to require real treatment, 7 with smaller injuries, and no deaths. The bandits left 2 dead and 1 captured. Mira questioned the prisoner, recorded the names and route he gave them, and sent him under guard to the district watch with Dorian's next wagon. Hale kept his leg. He complained that Leon did not sound sufficiently proud of this achievement. They returned to Grey Hollow at dusk the following day. The market square filled before the wagon stopped. People expected stories about the attack. Leon went directly to the clinic because one of the wounded needed the dressing changed. Mira told the story later. Her version apparently involved fewer moments where his hands shook after the danger had passed. The real reward arrived 3 days afterward. Elira stood with him at the pantry threshold while the pharmacy door filled the narrow room with white light. It was the first time Leon allowed any of the women a clear view beyond the door. Elira tested the boundary once. Her fingertips stopped against something cool and unyielding where empty air should have been. She could see the white aisles and refrigerated cases, but only Leon could cross the frame. The rule was cleaner than he had expected, and more important than he wanted to admit. For once, Elira had no immediate comment as she studied hundreds of boxes, bottles, packets, and sealed supplies from the doorway. "You see why I wanted money," Leon said. "I see why people would kill you for this." That was more Elira. Leon loaded the cart with enough antibiotics, fever reducers, antiseptic, oral rehydration supplies, dressings, gloves, masks, hygiene goods, and basic equipment to supply their clinic for weeks. Then he added more. The payment total rose. For the first time, he did not have to remove half the cart. Leon confirmed the purchase and read the remaining balance aloud for Elira. "We can afford that? Now we can." Leon wheeled the cart through the threshold. Only after every box was back in the manor could Elira take one from him. Nessa stopped writing. Harold lowered a cup halfway to his mouth. Livia came from the laundry yard. Selena, now healthy enough to spend most of the day working with children and recovering families, leaned over the stair rail. Mira walked in from guard practice with dust on her boots. They all looked at the stacked supplies. For the first time since waking in the wagon, Leon felt something he had not allowed himself to feel. What Leon felt was margin. Enough room to think beyond tomorrow, even if true safety remained far away. Then they heard voices outside. A new line of patients had formed at the gate. Only these people were not from Grey Hollow. They had come because someone somewhere down the trade road had heard that the plague village was the best place to survive being sick. By the 3rd month, Grey Hollow no longer looked like a village waiting for permission to disappear. The change was not clean or elegant. Half-repaired houses stood beside ruins. New timber showed pale against old blackened beams. The market had mud between the stalls. Chickens wandered through places where patients had once lain under blankets because there were not enough beds. But smoke rose from chimneys every morning. The mill turned again. Children had become loud enough that Livia complained about them with visible satisfaction. The clinic outgrew the manor. They moved the main treatment rooms into an old guild hall near the square. It had a broad central room, a kitchen, 2 smaller chambers, and enough space for separate entrances. The manor remained their home and storage point. The former fever houses became dedicated isolation buildings. People started calling the guild hall the healing house. Leon disliked the name because it sounded grander than what they actually did. Everyone else ignored him. Nessa now supervised 6 assistants. Harold supervised everyone, including people who did not technically work for him. He had learned basic use of several modern supplies and had become so comfortable with them that newcomers assumed he understood them completely. This was dangerous. One afternoon, Leon found him lecturing a visiting herbalist about adhesive bandages. "The clever part," Harold said, holding one up, "is that it sticks by itself." The herbalist stared in wonder. "What resin?" Harold looked at him across the room. Leon shook his head. He turned back solemnly. "Advanced resin." Later he asked why he had lied. "I did not lie. Whatever makes it stick is advanced. That is not how knowledge works." It worked on him. Leon had created a monster. Selena developed a different role. She spent time with the families who arrived frightened and exhausted, especially children. Patients trusted healers with medicine. Families trusted someone who could say, truthfully, that she had once been carried into Grey Hollow barely conscious and had walked back out. She never exaggerated it. That made the story stronger. Mira's guards grew to 23 regular members and a larger group of villagers who could be called during emergencies. She still trained them herself. Her leg ached after long days, but she refused to hide that, because several guards were former patients with scars of their own. Livia transformed sanitation from a temporary outbreak measure into routine. Waste pits were moved, wells were covered, wash areas were separated. She arranged monthly inspection days with Elder Tom, and somehow convinced households that a clean lane reflected family pride. Her greatest victory came when Sabine created a milder soap after villagers threatened to use her original formula for stripping paint. Elira turned their chaos into numbers. She tracked clinic costs, treatment fees, village trade, road repairs, food reserves, and tax obligations. She negotiated with Dorian so aggressively that the merchant once asked Leon whether pneumonia had damaged her capacity for mercy. "No," Leon told him. "I think recovery made it worse." Dorian heard the answer. "I knew it." Elira raised the price of barrels by 3%. His role was supposed to become easier as the system matured. Instead, it changed. Leon saw fewer simple dressings and more difficult cases. Harold and the assistants handled minor injuries, ordinary fevers, and routine follow-up. He dealt with the patients who were deteriorating, uncertain diagnoses within his competence, medication decisions, emergencies, and the constant need to prevent people from treating pharmacy products like magic sweets. They also began controlling access more carefully. Modern medicine was powerful here, but resistance, misuse, allergy, dosage, contamination, and counterfeit rumors could still destroy what they were building. Leon kept antibiotics under direct clinic control. Patients received instructions and supervised treatment where practical. The first true test of the larger system arrived as a line of wagons covered in red cloth. There were 7 carts, 41 people. They stopped outside the eastern gate near dusk. Mira's guards did not let them enter. Leon reached the gate with Nessa, Harold, and Selena behind him. The caravan leader had fever. So did at least a dozen others. 2 children lay beneath blankets. A woman was coughing hard enough to bend at the waist. They had come from a mining settlement farther north, where black fever had appeared 2 weeks earlier. Someone had told them Grey Hollow would take them. Mira stood beside the closed gate. "If we let 40 people in before examining them, every inn and empty room fills by night." She did not need to add the rest. Grey Hollow had suppressed local transmission. Bringing a concentrated group of infected travelers directly into the market could restart everything. The caravan leader heard them. "We were told you help people." "We do," Leon said. Then opened the gate. Behind him, one of the children whimpered. People inside Grey Hollow were gathering on the wall and along the street. Leon could feel the old fear moving through them. They remembered what a wagon full of fever meant. 3 months earlier, it had meant death arriving with wheels. Leon looked toward the open ground south of the wall. There had been a military quarantine camp there during the early outbreak. Most tents were gone. but drainage trenches and a few wooden frames remained. "We do not bring them into the village," Leon said. "We bring the clinic out here." That decision consumed the next 6 days. Mira's guards marked a perimeter and kept healthy villagers from wandering in. Livia arrived with wagons carrying water barrels, clean sheets, wash basins, and enough soap to make Sabine proud. Nessa assigned numbers before names because some patients were too confused to answer questions. Harold organized triage under a canvas awning. Elira sent food, but she also sent a note reminding him that quarantine camps did not become free inns for healthy merchants. Leon wrote back that 2 of the merchants had fever. She returned the note with the words, "Then charge the other 5. Selena worked with the children and separated families only as much as infection control required. She had a gift for making frightened people follow instructions without making them feel ordered around." Leon moved constantly, patient to patient, fever to wound, dehydration to breathing trouble. He adjusted treatments as symptoms changed and rejected easy assumptions. Not every sick traveler had black fever. One older man had a severe intestinal infection, likely worsened by bad water. A child had an infected cut hidden beneath a boot. Another man had no fever at all and had simply collapsed from exhaustion. That mattered. Calling everything plague was how people stopped thinking. On the second night, one woman worsened rapidly. Her breathing became labored and her pulse unstable. They moved her to the most closely monitored section. Leon worked with Harold and Nessa for nearly an hour before she stabilized enough to rest. When Leon stepped outside, rain had started. Mira stood under the awning, holding 2 cups. She handed him one. "Tea?" "Probably." "That answer is concerning." Leon smelled the cup. Still tea. They watched rain strike the quarantine ropes. Beyond them, Grey Hollow's lights glowed through the gate. "People were afraid when they saw the wagons," Mira said. "They should be cautious." "They were afraid you would let them all in." "I almost did." Mira glanced at him. "Why didn't you?" "Because helping the people outside by endangering everyone inside would be lazy. It would feel compassionate for an hour and stupid for a month." Mira drank her tea. "You really were a healer before." "What did you think I was?" "The old Leon once fainted when a servant cut his palm on glass." Leon stared at her. "You waited 3 months to tell me that?" It became funnier with time. By the 6th day, most of the caravan was improving. 34 would recover fully. 4 required longer treatment. 2 had never been infected and were released after observation. 1 elderly man died during the 3rd night. They buried him on a hill outside the camp with his nephew present. The camp had still lost 1 man, but the overall result was one Leon could defend. More importantly, the disease did not spread into Grey Hollow. When the quarantine period ended, the surviving travelers entered the village through open gates. People watched from the street. Then Tomas, the first village child Leon had treated, ran up to one of the caravan children and asked whether he wanted to see the mill. That was all it took. Fear became curiosity. By evening, the market had 40 new customers. A week later, the story had traveled farther than any of them expected. That was when Salvek arrived. Salvek represented the Provincial Guild of Alchemists. He was about 40, narrow-faced, beautifully dressed, and smelled faintly of lavender oil. 3 assistants followed him, carrying lacquered cases. He entered the healing house as though inspecting a rival shop he intended to purchase. He watched Harold clean a wound with antiseptic. He watched Nessa record a temperature. He watched a fever patient swallow 2 tablets. Then he asked to speak privately. Elira joined them without being invited. Salvek noticed and decided not to object. "Lord Arden," he began, "your achievements are impressive. The guild prefers cooperation to conflict." That is an encouraging sentence. Your medicines clearly belong to an advanced alchemical tradition. His smile tightened. "Whatever terminology you prefer, distribution of potent preparations is regulated." Elira opened a folder. Salvik's eyes flicked toward it. "Medical herbs, alchemical drafts, and enchanted restoratives are regulated," she said. "Lord Arden's preparations have not been classified under any listed guild category. Then, classification is necessary. Perhaps, by the governor's office, not solely by your guild. Salvek looked back at him. There is no need for hostility. We can make your work far more profitable. That was the real conversation. He proposed that Leon transfer exclusive regional distribution rights to the guild. They would package the medicine as elite restorative compounds, sell them to noble houses, and return a generous percentage to him. He also suggested that low-cost treatment for commoners was damaging established medical markets. Leon asked him to repeat that part. He did, more politely. Scarcity preserves standards, Salvek said. Disease does not care about standards. Markets do. Then your market is badly designed. Salvek's expression cooled. He tried another approach. Do you understand how many powerful people will want your source? The guild could protect you. From whom? People who dislike being excluded. Illyra leaned back in her chair. That sounds less like protection when you say it slowly. Salvek stood. He left without shouting, threatening, or making a dramatic declaration. That made him take him more seriously. Within 2 weeks, rumors appeared. Grey Hollow medicine caused infertility. Grey Hollow medicine contained powdered bone. Grey Hollow patients became dependent on white tablets. One story claimed they were hiding plague deaths beneath the healing house. That rumor died when Elder Thumb invited the man repeating it to count the graves personally. The others weakened for a simpler reason. Too many people were alive. Celia Vale was alive. The infected caravan was alive. Merchants, farmers, soldiers, children, and craftsmen had returned home alive. A rumor could frighten someone who had never seen the medicine work. It struggled against a neighbor who had. Still, Salvek's visit taught them something. Grey Hollow was no longer invisible. The second warning came from a government courier named Elias Wren. He arrived sick. Not dramatically. No collapse at the gate. He simply rode in after sunset, dismounted, and nearly fell because his legs had stopped cooperating. Mira's guards brought him to them. His fever was moderate. He had likely been infected several days earlier while traveling through affected districts. They treated him early. He recovered quickly enough to become embarrassed by the fuss. On the 4th day, Elias asked for his satchel. Inside was a regional map marked with black circles and red dates. Grey Hollow had once been one of the largest circles. Now, several new marks appeared north and east. One sat disturbingly close to Valmir, the provincial capital. Leon traced it with one finger. How current is this? Elias hesitated. The governor's office is still confirming reports. That means current. There are suspected cases in villages along the river road. A few inside Valmir's outer district. The city council does not want panic. So they are hiding it. They are controlling information. That is the expensive phrase for hiding it. Elias looked at the map. If they close the city too early, trade stops, food prices rise, and frightened people may flee before the roads are controlled. If they wait too long, the disease makes the decision for them. He nodded. Leon copied the relevant marks with Nessa's help, then returned the map. Grey Hollow was stable, but not invulnerable. They strengthened screening at the gate and required travelers from active outbreak areas to report symptoms. Over the next 6 weeks, the village kept growing while those safeguards became routine. More families returned, the market expanded, and the clinic trained enough assistants that Leon could spend more time on the difficult cases instead of every dressing and fever check. Leon did not tell the entire village that the provincial capital might be in danger yet. They already had another problem moving toward them from the opposite direction. At the Arden estate, Garrick received his quarterly report from Grey Hollow. Leon learned the details later from one of Garrick's clerks. The quarterly report listed population, taxable trade, road condition, and mortality. Garrick read it twice and then a third time. Grey Hollow's population was increasing. Its market had reopened, the southern road was repaired, and regular caravans were using it again. Deaths from black fever had nearly ended, while medical visitors were arriving from neighboring districts. Garrick had given him Grey Hollow because it was worthless. Now the land had an operating market, strategic trade access, a growing population, and a healer whose name was spreading through the province. He summoned his steward and asked one question: "Who owns the healing house?" The steward answered according to the transfer decree: "Lord Leon Arden, my lord." Garrick's next question was quieter: "And the village?" "Temporarily under his management until winter registration is complete. If he satisfies the recovery clauses, ownership becomes permanent." For the first time since sending them away, Garrick stopped assuming Grey Hollow would solve his problem for him. He decided to take it back himself. Garrick's first weapon was a man with clean gloves. His name was Magistrate Orson Marrow, a narrow-faced provincial official with a reputation for making small laws feel expensive. Orson arrived in a black carriage, accompanied by 6 armed retainers and 2 clerks. He refused to drink village water until Livia informed him that the manor water had been inspected that morning and was safer than most city wells. He drank after that, but only because refusing would have implied fear. Orson presented his demands in the manor office: a special plague recovery tax, a mandatory alchemical registration fee, retroactive road duties, a claim that all commercial structures on Arden ancestral land belonged to the senior branch of the family, and, most interestingly, a declaration that the healing house was therefore Garrick's property. Illyra read the papers in silence. Leon watched Orson. He watched her. That told him who he was actually afraid of. After 10 minutes, Illyra placed the first document down. Invalid. Orson's mouth tightened. Lady Arden. She placed down the second. Improper authority. The third. Expired statute. The fourth. Inventive. Orson's clerks looked at each other. Garrick had expected an isolated nephew, surrounded by dying peasants. He had not expected Illyra. She turned the transfer decree toward Orson and placed one finger on a paragraph near the bottom. Grey Hollow was granted under the Frontier Recovery Provision. The senior house surrendered ordinary revenue claims for the recovery period because the territory was classified as non-producing plague land. In exchange, Lord Leon assumed responsibility for population retention, road restoration, tax recovery, and registration. Orson leaned back. Temporary responsibility. Until the conditions are met. They have not been. Illyra smiled then. It was the smile she used on merchants shortly before they lost money. She had discovered the clause 2 weeks earlier while reviewing the estate papers, but at that point 2 conditions were still incomplete. The Southern Road had not yet passed its final local inspection, and their tax reserve was short. Dorian's latest caravan had closed the cash gap 3 days earlier. Elder Tom signed the road certificate that morning. Orson had arrived during the first week in which Grey Hollow could actually finish the claim. By the first frost, if Grey Hollow maintained the minimum legal population, restored a usable road, paid the ordinary land tax, and registered administration with the provincial governor, ownership would transfer fully to Leon as a recognized frontier holding. The population requirement had already been exceeded. The road was certified. The ordinary land tax equaled a little under 2 months of Grey Hollow's current cash surplus. Painful, but payable, because Illyra had been reserving 1 coin in 5 from outside treatment fees, market dues, and road income. Only registration remained. Garrick's false charges were not an attempt to win legally. They were meant to delay them until the deadline passed. Orson left with none of the money he had demanded. Before entering his carriage, he looked back at the market and said quietly to him, "Your uncle expected ruins. He should visit more often." "He may." That was not advice. They decided to register immediately. Under ordinary frontier procedure, a recognized representative could present the tax record, population ledger, road certification, and transfer decree at the governor's office. Orson's formal challenge changed that. A contested transfer required the titled claimant to swear personally that the records were complete before a provincial clerk. Illyra could carry every paper in Grey Hollow and still could not substitute for Leon now. "If Marrow had filed this before the challenge, I would have gone myself," Illyra said. "Now you are required. Mira is better at being attacked than I am." Mira looked offended. That sounded insulting. It was praise. "You need practice." The plan changed again when Elias, the government courier, offered to carry copies of their documents ahead. Copies will not complete registration, he said. But if something happens to you, the governor will know why. She also insisted they divide the tax money. One portion traveled with him, one with a second wagon under another guard. The largest portion went with Elias, sealed under courier authority, by a different road. Leon asked whether this was excessive. Elira looked at him, as though he had suggested storing antibiotics in the rain. Garrick sent 6 people to die because inheritance paperwork annoyed him. We are past excessive. Fair. Mira chose 8 guards. Corin came because he knew the backroads. Hale came because his leg had healed, and he considered this proof of a sacred obligation to put it in danger again. They left Grey Hollow before sunrise. Selena stood at the gate with Livia and Nessa. Come back with the land, Livia called. I thought we already had it. Elira, standing beside her, answered, come back with the paper proving we have it. That is often more important. The journey took 3 days under normal conditions. They planned 4. The first night, they stayed at an inn built around a stone courtyard. The owner recognized Grey Hollow's name and asked whether it was safe to let them sleep indoors. Mira stared at him until he decided the courtyard room was excellent. That night, one of the guards split his palm while repairing a harness buckle. Leon cleaned and dressed it. Then, he used the room's fixed closet door to open the pharmacy. Mira stood beside him, so it really works anywhere. Anywhere with a normal, fixed door, as far as I can tell. Could you open it in a prison? Probably. A castle? Probably. Leon looked at her. I am never testing that. Coward. The important part was not the joke. The pharmacy belonged to the ability, not the manner. Garrick could burn Grey Hollow to the ground and still not possess the source. That made his coming decisions even worse. On the 3rd morning, they reached Blackstone Bridge. The bridge crossed a narrow ravine where spring floods had cut deep through dark rock. It was wide enough for 1 wagon comfortably, 2 men on either side if they squeezed, and almost impossible to bypass without descending into the ravine. Corin slowed his horse before they reached it. Something is wrong. Mira raised a fist. The column stopped. What? Corin pointed across the bridge. A broken cart stood near the far end. 2 men appeared to be repairing a wheel. Too neat, Corin said. A broken wagon is neat? Hale asked. It is blocking exactly where we would have to stop. Mira scanned the ridge on both sides. No movement. Leon saw nothing. That meant little. Turn back? Leon asked. Mira considered the road behind them. If this is Garrick, he knows the route. Turning back may put us between groups. Then what? We make them show themselves before the wagon reaches the center. She sent 2 riders forward without the tax cart. They approached the bridge. The men beside the broken wagon stood. One lifted a hand. An arrow struck the road in front of the riders. Then armed men rose from both sides of the far ridge, at least 15. More appeared behind them. Garrick had planned properly, for once. Bridge, Mira said. We take the near mouth and deny both sides room. The drivers moved immediately. Their main wagon rolled sideways until its rear corner nearly touched the stone parapet, creating a barrier at the bridge entrance. The second cart stopped behind at an angle. Horses were moved into the shallow depression beside the road, where arrows had less line of sight. Garrick's men came from behind first. They wore mismatched coats and no insignia, but their boots matched and they moved in pairs. Their matching boots and paired movement exposed them as professionals dressed to resemble bandits. Their leader shouted for them to surrender the gold and documents. Mira shouted back that real bandits usually ask for horses too. There was a brief silence. Then the attack began. Leon stayed behind the wagon until the first guard was hurt. A crossbow bolt hit the wooden side, close enough to spray splinters across his face. Another punched through Hale's shield, but stopped in the layered wood before reaching his arm. Mira kept 4 guards facing the rear attackers and 2 watching the bridge. That balance lasted until 3 men from the far side shoved the broken cart away and rushed across. Now they were being pressed from both directions. The narrow bridge helped them and trapped them at the same time. Mira stepped onto it herself. Her sword work was not elegant, It was economical. She used the parapet to protect one side, forced the first attacker to approach directly, caught his blade on hers, and kicked his knee sideways. He fell against the stone. The man behind him had to step around, losing momentum. Hale joined her. 2 people held the bridge, against 5, because only 2 could properly fight side by side. Behind them, the rear line bent. One of their guards took a spear point through the shoulder. Leon pulled him behind the cart, with Corin's help. The wound was deep, but not immediately fatal. Leon cut the cloth away, controlled bleeding, stabilized the arm, and told him he was done fighting. Mira needs everyone. Mira needs people who can hold weapons without fainting. I am not fainting. He fainted before finishing the sentence. Excellent argument. Corin barked a laugh and went back to the line. The professional leader saw him kneeling with the wounded and changed targets. He came around the wagon, while 2 men engaged their guard line. Leon saw him too late. He had a short sword, leather armor, and the posture of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Leon grabbed a fallen spear. That made him look more dangerous than he was. He tested the point with a quick cut. Leon barely moved back in time. The second strike knocked the spear aside. The third opened his coat at the ribs and cut skin beneath. Enough to teach him the distance between emergency room confidence and actual sword training. Leon stepped backward around the wheel. He followed. Good. The wheel stayed between them for half a second. Leon shoved the wagon brake loose with his heel. They had parked on a slight incline. The cart moved, only a foot at first. The attacker shifted automatically to avoid the wheel. Leon pushed harder. The heavy wagon rolled another 2 feet and forced him toward the parapet wall at the road edge. He had to turn his shoulders. Leon threw the spear, not at him, at his legs. The shaft struck his shins. He stumbled. Corin hit him from the side. The leader fell hard enough to lose the sword. Corin raised his own blade. Alive, Leon said. Why? Because dead men answer questions poorly. Corin kicked the sword away instead. The fight shifted again when attackers on the bridge gained ground. Mira's bad leg slipped on loose gravel. The man in front of her saw it and committed to a heavy downward strike. Hale stepped in, caught the blow on his shield, and the repaired wood split. Mira recovered, drove forward, and struck the attacker's wrist. His sword fell over the parapet. The sound of it hitting rock below took several seconds to return. That reminded everyone how bad falling would be. The rear attackers began pushing toward the tax wagon. They had figured out which cart carried the lockbox. Mira saw them reaching it. Let them take it. Hale looked at her as though she had lost her mind. What? Let them take it. Fall back 2 steps. Their guards gave ground. The attackers surged toward the wagon. 2 men jumped onto it. Another cut the lockstrap and dragged out the iron-bound chest. Their leader, still pinned under Corin's knee, swore. He understood before his men did. The chest was too light. One attacker opened it. Inside were stones wrapped in cloth, and a note Alira had insisted on adding. Leon never saw the exact expression on the man's face, but Corin later claimed it was worth the entire battle. The note said, "If you are reading this, thank you for confirming Lord Garrick's intentions." The real money was already with Elias. The second portion traveled on a road Garrick's men had ignored. They carried only enough to make the decoy believable. Once the attackers realized there was no prize, their discipline changed. Professionals will fight hard for a mission. They fight differently for a failed one. Mira pushed immediately. Her bridge line advanced 3 paces. Corin and 2 guards drove the rear group away from the wagon. One attacker fled first, then another. Their injured leader shouted an order to withdraw. Within minutes, the road belonged to them. They had won. Not cleanly. 3 of their people were seriously wounded. Leon had a cut at his ribs, bruising along one arm, and a new respect for professional swordsmen. 2 attackers were dead, 5 wounded, and 4 captured. One prisoner carried a purse stamped inside with the Arden household mark. Not enough for a court conviction by itself. Enough to make the story ugly. They reached the provincial capital the following afternoon. Valmir was enormous compared with Grey Hollow. Stone walls, crowded gates, towers above red roofs. Carts backed up along the main road. Leon also noticed more cloth masks than he expected. Elias met them inside the government quarter. He had arrived the previous day. The governor's clerks had already reviewed the copies. Their damaged wagon, wounded guards, captured attackers, and Garrick's marked purse made the administrative process unusually fast. By sunset, the tax was accepted. The road certification was approved. The population ledger was recorded. The frontier grant was sealed. Grey Hollow became Leon's legal holding, with temporary management replaced by full ownership. Garrick could no longer reclaim it after winter. The governor himself did not meet them. He was occupied with what officials called public health disturbances in the eastern wards. That phrase interested him more than the seal, but Grey Hollow came first. They returned with the document locked beneath Mira's seat, a copy sewn into Corin's coat, and another carried by a separate rider because Alira had infected all of them with paperwork paranoia. At the village gate, people were waiting. Selena saw the governor's seal in his hand and smiled before anyone spoke. Elder Thom removed his cap. Alira took the document, read every line, checked both signatures, checked the seal, and finally exhaled. "It is done." Mira leaned on the gatepost. "Please tell me we do not need to fight anyone else for paper." Alira looked toward the road behind them. For this paper? No. That answer should have worried him more than it did. Garrick received his own copy of the registration notice 4 days later. He could no longer steal Grey Hollow through tax law. He could no longer claim the healing house through inheritance. He could no longer wait for disease to kill them. So he chose the only method left to a man who had confused legality with ownership for too long. He hired soldiers. Garrick did not march under the Arden banner. He used a legal mask instead. Orson Marrow was a sitting magistrate with enough emergency authority to sign an emergency quarantine warrant claiming new black fever cases and contaminated alchemical compounds in Grey Hollow. The warrant was real paper with a real magistrate's seal. It could justify temporary containment while the province reviewed an outbreak. It did not lawfully authorize Garrick to seize the land or burn a village. But that distinction was easy to hide from hired soldiers until they were already on the road. Notices appeared in nearby towns, repeating the claim and naming Orson's office as the source. Garrick was not foolish enough to declare open war on a legally registered relative while the governor's seal was still fresh. He intended the attack to look like plague enforcement that had gone badly, not a family war. 3 days later, Dorian sent a rider with a warning. A mercenary company was gathering at an estate west of the river. Garrick had paid them. Their official purpose was quarantine enforcement. Their real purpose was obvious. Alira used the same rider before he had finished drinking. She sealed copies of the registration, Orson's earlier demands, and Dorian's warning into a packet for the governor's office. Valmir was 3 days away by normal wagon travel. A hard relay rider might make it in 2, but nobody expected provincial soldiers to arrive before Garrick did. The point was to make sure that if Grey Hollow was attacked, the government learned who had moved first. Mira read Dorian's message once and began giving orders. There was little need for a dramatic council. They had spent months building Grey Hollow, and everyone already knew which part of the village depended on them. The preparations began immediately. The village wall was old stone in some places, heavy timber in others. It would not withstand a real army, but Garrick could not bring siege engines without admitting he was attacking them. Mira concentrated on gates, narrow streets, rooftops, and places where disciplined villagers could delay professionals. She had 42 people capable of organized defense. Only 26 had proper weapons. The rest had hunting bows, axes, spears made from farm tools, and shields Jory assembled from layered boards. "We are not beating them in an open field," Mira said. "Good," Leon answered. "I was hoping not to stand in one." "You are not standing anywhere near the first line." "Even better." Alira divided food, money, and records between multiple buildings. The original registration document went into a hidden stone compartment beneath Elder Tom's house. Copies were placed with Dorian's caravan office and the local temple. "If Garrick wants to destroy proof," Alira said, "he will need to burn half the province." Nessa turned the healing house into a casualty station. She assigned tables, cots, clean water, instruments, and assistance before anyone had been wounded. She prepared tags for patients because names become confusing when too many injured people arrive at once. Livia organized fire crews. Every lane received barrels. Roofs nearest the outer wall were soaked. Hooks and ladders were distributed. Children and elderly residents were assigned to stone cellars near the center. Selena took responsibility for the shelters. She visited each family before the attack and made them show her which route they would use if the bell rang. Leon moved the medicine. A mistake during the thieves' raid had taught them how vulnerable a single storeroom was. Now, antibiotics, bandages, antiseptic, pain medicine, fever reducers, and emergency supplies went into 4 caches. The largest remained near the healing house. Smaller reserves went to the manor, the granary, and the old mill cellar. Cold, sensitive products stayed refrigerated inside the pharmacy until Leon needed them, because nobody else could enter to retrieve them. Nessa also packed spare batteries beside every battery-powered field device. The pharmacy itself could not be stolen. The things Leon bought from it could. That distinction might decide how long they lasted. The night before Garrick arrived, Leon found Mira in the market square, painting numbers on wooden signs. Around her, guards were adjusting cloth masks. They still used masks in crowded treatment areas and during suspected respiratory illness. Mira had ordered extras for smoke, dust, and basic protection during the expected fires. One old guard named Paris had drawn teeth across the front of his. The man beside him had added a skull. A third had painted red lines beneath the eyes. Leon stopped. "What are you doing?" Paris tied his mask behind his head. "Improving morale. Those are medical masks. Now they are frightening medical masks. They were designed to reduce contamination, not terrify mercenaries." Paris looked toward Mira. Lady Mira approved. Mira did not look up from the sign. They now perform 2 functions. Efficiency. Leon stared at all of them. Livia walked past carrying a bucket list. She saw the masks, saw his face, and said, "Do not fight this battle too." Garrick's mercenaries arrived the next afternoon. There were nearly 90 of them. Too many. They formed on a western road beneath a cold gray sky. Most wore leather or mail, with dark green scarves tied around one arm. Archers stood behind shieldmen. Mounted riders remained farther back. A closed carriage waited 200 paces behind the line, with no Arden banner on it. Garrick had actually come, officially as the complainant named in Orson's quarantine warrant, and practically because he wanted to see the problem ended. He stayed behind hired soldiers, and seemed to believe the stamped order would make every later witness sound like a plague criminal. If Grey Hollow burned and its records disappeared, there would be few surviving voices strong enough to challenge that story. Leon saw him from the wall for the first time since inheriting Leon's body. The memories supplied a taller man from years earlier. Reality had thickened him at the waist and thinned his hair. His beard was clipped close, his coat lined with fur, his posture still carrying the automatic certainty of someone who had spent decades being obeyed. The mercenary commander rode close enough to the gate for conversation. Leon's inherited memories identified him as Merrick Rusk, a veteran officer who had fought border campaigns before selling his company to nobles. Mira stood on the wall above him. Leon joined her despite her glare. Rusk unrolled a paper by emergency quarantine warrant signed by Magistrate Orson Marrow. Grey Hollow is declared a suspected active contamination site, pending provincial review. All residents will surrender weapons and submit to controlled evacuation. Medical compounds will be secured for inspection. Illyra, standing below with a copy of the provincial registration, called up. Marrow signed it. Rusk turned the lower edge of the page so she could see the seal. Seal, witness mark, and physician statements were attached to my contract. I was told the governor had been notified. Marrow may order temporary containment while evidence is reviewed, Illyra said. He cannot transfer this land, destroy the clinic, or override the governor's registration. Read your own limits. Rusk's expression showed that he already had. He lowered the paper. Lord Leon, open the gate. This does not need to become bloodshed. Leon looked at the men behind him. What happens after evacuation? My contract says the site is secured until a plague inspector arrives. And Garrick's orders say, cleansed. Rusk did not answer that. Leon pointed toward the carriage. Grey Hollow is not in active outbreak. Your own men can see the market, the water crews, the children being moved to shelters. The governor registered this territory less than 2 weeks ago. Rusk's eyes moved along the defenses. He saw farmers, tradesmen, women carrying water, young guards, and people who did not look like a village collapsing from plague. That did not prove the absence of disease, but it did not match the picture he had been sold either. Garrick sent a rider forward. The message was short. Rusk read it twice, then folded it with his thumb pressed hard along the crease. Last chance, he said. You know something is wrong with this, Leon said. Rusk looked back at Orson's seal, then at the governor's copy in Alira's hands. I know. I have a stamped quarantine warrant, 2 conflicting claims, and no superior officer standing here to revoke the order. I was hired to enforce the warrant, not decide which noble lies better. If the governor countermanded it, I would obey him. He has not reached me. That answer was hard, but it was not stupid. Rusk was choosing the document he had been contracted to enforce. Garrick was counting on exactly that. Leon rested both hands on the stone parapet. 5 months ago, a quarantine order here might have made sense. Today, you are trying to evacuate the healthiest village on this road. Rusk rolled up the warrant. He rode back. The first attack began with arrows. Mira had expected it. Defenders dropped behind stone and timber screens. Roof watchers moved out of sight. The mercenaries fired in volleys meant less to kill than to clear the gate area. Then, shield men advanced, carrying axes and hooks. Grey Hollow's archers waited. Mira made them wait longer than some liked. At 50 paces, mercenary shields covered most targets. At 30, the road narrowed between old drainage walls. At 20, Mira dropped her hand. Arrows came from the wall, 2 roofs, and a hidden platform behind the abandoned tannery. Not enough to stop the attack. Enough to break its rhythm. One shield man fell. Another turned to help him. Mira's people dropped stones and heavy timber blocks onto the first men reaching the gate. The mercenaries had expected weak villagers. They had not expected prepared villagers. They still had professionals. Within minutes, they reached the gate and began hacking at the outer braces. Leon left the wall. His job started when theirs did. The first wounded defender came into the healing house with an arrow in the shoulder. The second had a broken wrist from a falling beam. The third had a deep scalp cut. Nessa directed them before Leon could. Shoulder to table 2. Wrist to Harold. Head wound, sit there and stop touching it. The injured guard blinked at her. It is bleeding. Yes, your hand is making it dirtier. He lowered his hand. Leon worked on the arrow wound. Outside, the gate shook under repeated blows. The sound moved through the floor. No one in the room stopped. That mattered more than courage speeches. The first assault failed after nearly 40 minutes. Rusk pulled his men back before they exhausted themselves against the reinforced gate. Grey Hollow cheered. Mira stopped the cheering quickly. They learned where we are strong, she said. Now they try somewhere else. She was right. The second attack came after dark. Fire arrows landed on roofs along the western lane. Then, mercenaries approached the north wall under cover of smoke, while everyone looked toward the flames. Livia's preparation saved them. Water barrels were already positioned. Fire crews had wet blankets and hooks ready. Burning thatch was ripped away before it spread to entire roofs. Livia stood on the upwind side of the lane, with her copper hair tied beneath a scarf and a medical mask over her mouth, shouting directions through smoke. Leon had made her keep her rescue medication in the pocket of her apron. When her chest tightened once, she stepped behind a stone wall, used it, handed the bucket line to an older washerwoman for 2 minutes, and returned only after her breathing settled. A young man panicked when his family's shed caught fire and tried to run inside for tools. She grabbed his coat. Your tools can burn. You cannot. Bucket line. He obeyed. At the north wall, the mercenaries got ladders up. Mira shifted reserves, The fighting there became close and ugly. No elegant duels, men slipping on wet timber, spears thrust through gaps, shields hitting faces. Villagers backing away when professionals gained the top, then swarming one isolated attacker instead of meeting him alone. Korin took a cut along the forearm. He tied it himself badly and kept fighting until Nessa saw him later and threatened to sew his sleeve to his skin if he did not come inside. The wall held. Then the old cattle gate opened from inside. Paris saw Van at the bar, a heartbeat too late. Months of supervised roadwork after the pharmacy theft had kept him in Grey Hollow, and during the fire alarm, he had been assigned to carry water, nowhere near the defenses. Smoke, buckets, and frightened civilians gave him a path no guard would have allowed on an ordinary day. He lifted the bar, slipped through the opening, and vanished behind the first mercenaries before Paris reached him. The gate was small, barely wide enough for a cart. It was enough. 12 mercenaries entered before Paris and 3 guards blocked the lane. More came behind them. The breach turned the defense into street fighting. Mira abandoned the north wall and led 6 people toward the cattle lane. The mercenaries had already spread into 2 groups. One moved toward the market. The other headed directly for the Hewen house. They knew the objective: medicine and records. Leon was in the treatment hall when Selena ran through the rear door. Leon. They broke through. How close? A crash sounded outside. That answered it. Nessa looked toward the patients. 12 wounded people lay in the hall. 3 could walk with help. The rest could not. Back exit, Leon said. Move anyone stable to the manor cache. Harold goes with them. Harold objected. You need me here. I need someone competent with the patients. You are competent. I am about to become busy with something stupid. Another impact hit the front door. Harold swore at him, which Leon accepted as agreement. Selena and 2 assistants began moving patients through the rear. Nessa stayed. Go, Leon said. No, Nessa. There are still 3 who cannot be moved quickly. She was right. Leon hated that everyone around him had learned to be right at inconvenient times. A mercenary came through first with a shield. Leon knocked a bench sideways into the narrow entry. He had to climb over or move it. He chose to move it. That gave Leon time to pull the heavy treatment table across the hallway behind it, creating a second obstacle. This is a clinic, Leon shouted. There are wounded men in here, including yours if you have any sense. The answer came from outside. Stand aside. A man stepped through the broken doorway. Not Rusk. His lieutenant, perhaps. Large, male shirt, shaved head, sword in hand. His left cheek carried an old burn scar. Name? Leon asked. He looked genuinely confused. If you are going to bleed on my floor, I need a name for the record. Nessa made a sound behind Leon that might have been disbelief. The mercenary's mouth twitched. Dane Vor. Good. Dane, there are patients behind me. Then move. No. Leon had prepared for this specific possibility, and was still immediately reminded that preparation does not turn a medic into a swordsman. Leon had a short spear from the guard rack. Dane cut its point aside, stepped inside the reach, and hit him with his shield. Leon flew backward into the table. Pain burst through his ribs. The cut from Blackstone Bridge had barely healed. This felt personal. Leon shoved the table at him as he advanced. Dane kicked it aside. Leon retreated into the narrower hall leading to the treatment rooms. That was intentional. The hall allowed only one man to approach comfortably. Leon knocked a chair over behind him and dragged a cabinet partly across the path. The cabinet's back struck an old support post beside the storeroom arch. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Smoke was leaking through cracked plaster above it, and one end of the beam had already darkened from the fire next door. Jory had complained during the first repairs that this section should eventually be replaced. Leon remembered because Jory complained about buildings with professional dedication. Dane remained better at fighting by an insulting amount. He slashed Leon's upper arm. Leon struck his shoulder with the spear shaft. Dane barely noticed and drove him backward again. You are not a soldier, he said. I have noticed. Patients behind me. Dane's jaw tightened and came forward. Leon threw a metal tray at his face. Dane raised the shield. The tray clanged against it. Leon kicked the chair, trapped near his front foot. Dane stumbled half a step. Not enough to win. He recovered and rammed the cabinet with his shield to clear the passage. The cabinet slammed into the heated support post. This time, the wood answered with a sharp crack, and a thin line opened along the joint above them. Leon saw it. He stopped retreating for half a heartbeat, giving Dane a target worth rushing, then stepped beyond the damaged beam as the mercenary committed his weight forward. Dane followed exactly as Leon needed him to. Leon kicked the broken chair leg sideways into the base of the already shifted post. It moved less than an inch. That was enough. A deep wooden snap rolled through the hall. Dane looked up. Leon threw himself backward. The support failed, and the beam came down with part of the plaster ceiling, striking Dane across the shoulder and pinning him to the floor. Dust filled the hall. For several seconds, Leon could not hear anything except ringing. Nessa shouted his name. Leon coughed, pushed debris off his coat, and crawled toward Dane. He was conscious. Barely. Blood ran from his scalp. The beam trapped one arm and part of his chest. Outside, someone shouted an order. Then another voice. Louder. Garrick. Burn the healing house. If they will not surrender it, burn it. His eyes changed. Mercenaries were still inside. His men. Garrick knew that. Leave me, Dane said. Leon began clearing smaller debris. No. The roof is burning. Also noticed, your enemy is outside. You are currently beneath a beam. Priorities. Nessa appeared beside him. Together they lifted one end, enough for Dane to drag his arm free, but he could not stand. Two gray hollow guards entered from the rear and helped move him. They carried Dane into the yard behind the healing house, just as flames reached the front roof. Lydia's fire crews were already there. Buckets passed hand to hand. Selena had moved the last patient to the manor cellar. Mira arrived from the market, with blood on one sleeve that was not hers. She saw him sitting against the wall, saw the cut on his arm, and looked prepared to murder someone on principle. Later, Leon said, "Who did that?" Leon pointed at Dane. He lay on a blanket, while Nessa examined his shoulder. Mira stared. "You saved him?" It was becoming repetitive. Dane laughed once, then winced. The fire did not destroy the healing house. Lydia's crews contained it to the front roof and one storage room. More importantly, the medical supplies inside had already been divided. They lost bandages, furniture, some records, and part of the building. They did not lose the clinic. Dane watched Grey Hollow people carry wounded mercenaries into the same yard as their own defenders. 5 enemy soldiers had been trapped during the breach. They treated them. Not first. Triage did not care whose coin paid the company. But they treated them. Rusk entered the village under a white cloth just before dawn. His remaining men held the western road, but had stopped attacking. He came to retrieve Dane and the wounded. Garrick sent a rider, ordering him to resume the assault. Rusk read the message in the market square. Dane, arm bound to his chest, was sitting near the healing house wall. He ordered them to burn us inside, Dane said. Rusk looked at him. Leon had a bandage around his upper arm and another at his ribs, where Dane's shield had reopened part of the old wound. Rusk asked, "Ask your men." One of the wounded mercenaries answered from a cot. "We heard it." Rusk turned toward Garrick's position outside the gate. The lie had become too large. Grey Hollow was not plague-ridden. The villagers were not imprisoned victims begging for rescue. The medicine was real. The legal document was real. And Garrick had just tried to burn his own hired soldiers alive, to destroy evidence and supplies. Rusk folded the order once, then tore it in half. He walked outside the gate. His company did not follow Garrick's next command. That should have ended it. Garrick had 30 personal retainers and household guards remaining. He decided 30 were enough. He ordered them forward. Some obeyed because they had served his family for years. Some because turning against a lord felt more dangerous than attacking villagers. A few probably still believed Grey Hollow's survival threatened everything they had been told. Mira took the wall again. This time, Rusk's mercenaries stood aside. Garrick's men reached the damaged western gate and forced through the section, weakened during the first assault. The last fight lasted less than 15 minutes. It was not glorious. It was furious. Grey Hollow people fought in the streets they had cleaned, beside shops they had reopened, around wells they had made safe. Cooper's sons, farmers, hunters, former patients, guards who had once arrived at the manor, coughing or limping. Dorian's local clerks joined with crossbows. Even old Pell appeared with a hammer and shouted that Garrick's men were lowering property values. Mira led from the front, because this was the kind of problem she had spent months preparing to solve. She did not duel Garrick. She did not need to. His personal guard broke when they realized no mercenary reinforcement was coming. Garrick tried to return to his carriage. Tomas's mother Marta saw him first. She pointed. A dozen villagers closed the road. Garrick stopped. For the first time, the man who had sent Grey Hollow's people to die had to look at them from close enough to recognize their faces. Some had scars. Some were thin. Some leaned on canes. All were standing. Elder Thom stepped forward. You should have visited when the graves were fresh. Garrick reached for his sword. Corin took it from him before he cleared the sheath. Former thief, Corin explained. Garrick stared at him as Leon approached. His face had gone pale beneath the anger. You stole my land. Leon looked around at Grey Hollow, at the burnt roof, at the healing house yard full of wounded from both sides, at Livia's people carrying water, at Nessa directing assistance, at Selena leading children out of the shelters now that the danger had passed, at Illyra holding the governor's sealed copy in both hands, at Mira standing beside the gate with a sword resting against one shoulder. You gave it away, Leon said. Garrick was taken into Rusk's custody until provincial officers could arrive. Only after the western gate was secured did Nessa finish the casualty count. Grey Hollow had lost 3 defenders, and 21 more were wounded, 6 seriously. Rusk's company had 7 dead and 18 wounded. 4 of Garrick's household men had died in the final rush. The healing house treated the survivors by urgency. That afternoon, Grey Hollow buried its 3 dead on the low hill beyond the north wall. Rusk's company buried its own men farther west. Leon sent clean water, linen for shrouds, and 2 of Harold's assistants, because the fact that they had attacked did not make infection a useful punishment. The victory felt different after the graves were closed. Rusk had every reason to cooperate. Orson's warrant had given him a plausible reason to begin the operation. Garrick's later orders had stripped that excuse away in front of his own men. He now had surviving witnesses, wounded soldiers Garrick had knowingly tried to burn, and a reputation to protect. Ven was found the next morning, hiding in the abandoned tannery. Corin recognized him before he could run. Ven admitted that a man from Garrick's estate had paid him to open the cattle gate during the fires. Mira did not threaten his leg this time. She simply had him tied for the provincial officers. Elias arrived 2 days later with government riders, following the warning Elira had sent before the siege. He read the documents, heard the witnesses, inspected Orson's warrant and the false plague notices, and looked very tired. The governor is going to hate this, he said. Garrick? The paperwork, Garrick is simpler. Leon understood completely. Garrick left Grey Hollow in chains under provincial guard, with witnesses, evidence, and the broken false claim traveling with him. The people he had discarded stood along the road and watched him leave their land. His conflict with Leon was finished. Orson Marrow did not disappear into the paperwork. Elias later sent word that the magistrate had been suspended, while the province investigated his emergency warrant and the fabricated levies his own clerks had preserved. Ven's confession and Rusk's contract gave the investigators a clean path back to Garrick's money. Whether Orson cooperated to save himself was a problem for Valmir's courts. That evening, the village bell rang to mark the end of the siege instead of another death. The weeks after the siege were quieter than any period since Leon had opened his eyes in the wagon. Quiet did not mean empty. It meant work that did not involve someone trying to kill them. Leon developed a new appreciation for that category. The healing house roof was repaired before the first hard frost. Jory complained that mercenaries had damaged perfectly good beams. Lydia replied that they had also set half the roof on fire, so his standards for perfectly good needed revision. Rusk's company paid part of the repair cost from the money Garrick had advanced them. Rusk insisted on it. He also paid for treatment of his wounded men. Elira accepted both payments and added an administrative fee. When Leon asked what the fee covered, she said, administration. Leon chose not to challenge her expertise. Grey Hollow's name spread farther after the siege. Soldiers carried the story farther than any proclamation could. Mercenaries traveled from contract to contract. Men who had entered Grey Hollow, expecting plague-ridden fanatics, left telling stories about a village where enemy wounded received the same clean bandages as defenders, where fever patients recovered behind whitewashed walls, and where an old healer carried a tiny device that supposedly trapped numbers inside it. Harold encouraged the last part by refusing to explain thermometers properly. Within a month, travelers began arriving from districts Leon had never heard of. Some came for treatment, some came to trade. Some came because they had survived black fever elsewhere and wanted to live somewhere that did not treat sickness as a moral failure. The old quarantine board at the road was finally removed. Elder Thom insisted on doing it himself. The sign had been nailed to the post before most wealthy families fled. Its paint was faded. One corner had rotted away. He pried out the first nail, stopped to rest his bad knee, and handed him the hammer. Finish it. You started. I am old enough to delegate symbolic labor. Leon pulled the remaining nails. The board came loose. Behind it, the wood of the post was lighter, protected from months of weather. Tomas immediately asked whether he could have the sign. His mother told him absolutely not. He asked Elder Thom. Tom gave it to him. Marta spent the next 10 minutes explaining why village government was irresponsible. The market grew to 37 regular stalls. Dorian established a permanent warehouse beside the southern road and claimed he was doing it solely because trade volume justified the expense. The population growth would have become dangerous without food. So Elira tied new household settlement to available housing and ration capacity. Dorian's grain contracts, the recovered fields, preserved vegetables, and the fall harvest built a 90-day winter reserve at the current permanent population, plus a smaller emergency stock the clinic could not spend for anything except patients. Then he asked whether Celia could spend part of the spring in Grey Hollow to learn Nessa's record system. Leon looked at him. Solely trade volume? Dorian adjusted his coat. My daughter's educational interests are unrelated. Of course. He sent him another pair of boots for winter. They fit perfectly. Leon found that suspicious. Elira controlled village finances from a room above the market office. People who had once known her only as one of the Lord's sick wives now approached her with contracts, complaints, tax questions, and trade proposals. She had recovered enough that she no longer kept a blanket around her shoulders. She had also become more dangerous because she could now argue while walking. Mira trained a permanent guard of 30. Her leg never returned to the exact condition it had been before the infected wound. Cold mornings made the scars stiff. She considered that an acceptable price for keeping the leg attached. She also introduced a rule that every guard had to learn basic wound compression and safe patient transport. You are turning them into medics, Leon said. No, I am reducing the number of idiots who carry wounded men upside down. Reasonable. Nessa expanded the records room until it occupied an entire side of the healing house. She trained assistants to recognize dangerous changes and call for help early. She also began keeping village birth, death, and illness statistics with enough precision that Elder Thom surrendered his old burial ledger to her with visible relief. My handwriting was better, he said. It was not. Livia took over the practical management of the healing house and sanitation crews. If Leon bought a new supply from the pharmacy, she wanted to know where it would be stored, who would use it, how much water it required, and whether the packaging could be repurposed. She treated empty plastic containers as a personal challenge. Selena became the face new families recognized. She met wagons at the gate, explained clinic rules, arranged temporary housing, and spent particular time with frightened children. People found it difficult to argue that Grey Hollow was a death village while speaking to a healthy young woman who could point to the upstairs window where she had once lain too weak to stand. The 5 women had not transformed into a chorus of adoration. That would have been easier. They disagreed with him constantly. Elira thought Leon spent too much on emergency reserve stock. Leon thought she underestimated disaster. Mira thought he walked alone at night too often. Leon thought she assigned guards to follow him too often. Nessa had developed the terrible habit of using his own records to prove Leon needed sleep. Livia moved anything Leon left in the wrong room and refused to tell him where, until he admitted it had been in the wrong room. Selena discovered that asking him whether Leon had eaten was more effective when done in front of patients. Somewhere during those arguments, the household stopped feeling like 5 political marriages inherited from a dead man. It became a family in the practical sense. People who knew where Leon would forget his coat. People who could identify when Leon was lying about being tired. People who had built parts of Grey Hollow Leon could not have built himself. That last lesson mattered most. In the beginning, Leon had tried to touch every patient, check every dose, solve every crisis personally. That instinct came from years in emergency medicine, where responsibility arrives in one body at a time. Grey Hollow had taught him a different scale. One medic could save a patient. A working clinic could save a street. A trained staff, clean water, records, quarantine, trade, guards, money and trust could save a village even while the medics slept. Leon still did not sleep enough. Nessa was working on it. One cold morning, Elder Thom found him outside the market, watching workers mark foundations beyond the north lane. The village wall was being extended to include a row of new houses. He stood beside him with both hands on his staff. "We need another quarter." Leon looked at him. "Another what?" "Quarter. Houses. Streets. People are arriving faster than Jory can repair old buildings." When Leon first came to Grey Hollow, Tom had offered him the manor because it was the best roof under which to die. Now his problem was real estate pressure. Leon looked toward the new foundations. How many people now? 412 permanent. More, if you count patients and traders. We started with 183. 180 by sunset, Tom corrected. Leon remembered. He did too. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then he pointed at the nearest foundation. That one is too close to the drain. The emotional moment ended appropriately. They argued about drainage for 20 minutes. That afternoon, Harold came to find him with the expression he usually reserved for emergencies. Leon was reviewing medicine stock with Nessa. He closed the door behind him. "We have a problem." Leon put the ledger down. "How many patients?" "Not patients. Water? No. Fire? No." Nessa looked up. "Then what?" Harold lowered his voice. "The mint paste is gone." Leon waited. "What mint paste?" He looked shocked by his ignorance. "For teeth. Toothpaste." Leon had introduced modern toothbrushes and toothpaste almost by accident when buying hygiene supplies. Livia had distributed several tubes among the household and clinic staff. Then, someone gave one to a merchant. The merchant told someone else. Apparently, Grey Hollow had discovered mint toothpaste and lost all proportion. "People are asking for it," Harold said. "People ask for antibiotics too." "Not like this." Sabine offered 2 bars of soap for 1 tube. Nessa covered her mouth with one hand. Her shoulders moved. "Are you laughing?" "No. You are." Harold remained deadly serious. A trader from Bellcross offered silver. Leon pressed fingers against his forehead. Mira entered without knocking. "Why is everyone talking about toothpaste?" Livia appeared behind her, carrying an empty tube. "Because someone used the last one." Selena followed. "It was not me." Elira arrived last, holding a sheet of figures. "If demand remains at the current level, we should charge traders more." Leon looked at all 5 of them. At Harold. At the empty toothpaste tube. "We survived Black Thiever, Derek, bandits, a siege, and an alchemist guild. And this is the meeting that gathers everyone?" Mira folded her arms. "The mint paste is very good." Leon gave up. The pharmacy portal opened in the manor pantry. Leon bought toothpaste. More than he expected to buy in a medieval plague recovery economy. Grey Hollow remained ridiculous in small ways. That helped, because the next carriage arrived before sunset. It carried red quarantine flags. The gate guard sent for him immediately. A government carriage rolled into the square, escorted by 6 provincial riders. People stopped moving when they saw the flags. Months earlier, red cloth on a wagon would have emptied the street. Now villagers stepped aside, but did not flee. Elias climbed down from the carriage. Illness had spared Elias, but exhaustion showed in his face and posture. He carried a sealed letter bearing the governor's crest. Elira, Mira, Nessa, Livia, and Selena gathered near him as he approached. "How bad?" Leon asked. Elias did not pretend not to understand. "Valmir has confirmed black fever in 4 districts. 2 more are suspected. The council tried localized closures. People moved before the barriers were complete. The Eastern Hospital is full. 3 guild clinics stopped accepting common patients yesterday. Salvex Guild." Leon looked at the carriage. "Why are you here?" Elias handed him the letter. "Because the governor has a city of more than 40,000 people, and exactly 1 place in the province that can prove it stopped the same outbreak." Leon broke the seal. The letter was concise. The governor requested his presence in Valmir, with whatever staff and supplies he considered necessary. The wording mattered. The governor was requesting his help. 6 months earlier, Garrick's men had shoved his household across a quarantine line and left before dark. Now, the highest provincial authority was sending a carriage into Grey Hollow to ask for help. Elira read over his shoulder. 40,000, she said quietly. Nessa was already looking toward the healing house, calculating records, supplies, staff. Livia asked Elias about clean water access in the closed districts. Selena wanted to know how many children had been moved from infected homes. Mira asked the simplest question: what if the city is already lost? No one answered immediately. Leon looked across Grey Hollow. The quarantine sign was gone. Market lanterns were being lit, one by one. Smoke rose from occupied houses. A cart loaded with timber passed toward the new northern quarter. In the healing house, Harold was probably hiding toothpaste from traders. 6 months earlier, nearly everyone outside this village had considered it lost. Some people inside had believed the same. Leon folded the governor's letter. They said that about Grey Hollow. Mira's mouth curved slightly. If we take enough medicine for a city, the first purchase will be enormous. We have income. We have village income. A city consumes differently. Then, we do not try to treat 40,000 people personally. Nessa understood first. We build the same system bigger, as fast as we can. The next morning, Grey Hollow woke before dawn. They did not abandon the village. That would have defeated everything they had built. Harold remained in charge of the healing house, with trained assistants. Elira arranged authority for trade and finances, while traveling only for the first stage. Livia prepared sanitation supplies. Nessa packed records, forms, thermometers, and enough pencils to make a royal scribe jealous. Mira selected guards. Selena organized family support materials and blankets. Leon opened the pharmacy door. White light filled the pantry. For several minutes, Leon stood among ordinary shelves from a world that no longer existed for him. They held antibiotics, antiseptic, masks, gloves, rehydration supplies, pain relief, dressings, thermometers, and other basic medical necessities. Nothing on those shelves looked powerful enough to change history. That had always been the trick. Power depended on where you placed the shelf. Leon bought what they could carry first. When he stepped back into the manor, the others were waiting. They loaded the government carriage and 2 Grey Hollow wagons. At the gate, Elder Tom shook his hand. "Bring the wagons back." "Not me. You are difficult to replace. The wagons are expensive. Elira has been teaching you." Terrible influence. Tomas ran along the road beside them until Marta caught him and dragged him back by the collar. Dorian's warehouse workers lifted their caps. Mira's guards opened the gate. There was no quarantine board above it anymore. The road outside was busy with merchants coming in as their wagons went out. Grey Hollow had become exactly what Garrick never imagined it could be. A place people traveled toward when they wanted to live. For 2 days, the road carried them through farms, market hamlets, and increasingly nervous checkpoints. On the third afternoon, Valmir's distant walls finally cut across the winter horizon. Black quarantine flags could be seen above part of the eastern district. Grey Hollow had been 180 dying people. Valmir held tens of thousands. The scale was different. The rules were not. Leon rested one hand on the medicine chest beside him as the wagon picked up speed. Then they rode toward the city.